I'm the COE. You don't know me. From your group, you want to throw me, show me, scold me, mold me, tarnish my crown with your frown, take me down. But I keep on coming, with strength that's mind-numbing. Didn't anticipate this time it'll last. Close your mouth, it's drooping aghast. You want to go to the champ? When you need the side ramp for the secret Socratic self-cramp? Your voice is shit, you need the amp, filter, echo, high pass, auto-tune, approval stamp. Even Bogdanovs can't procure you a pity pant. Your content's not dark, it's damp. I'm COE. You don't know me. Cosmic Flame Wars show me where to light fuse on the FG. Was it worth the clown? You're about to tap out as I go to the mat and lay you flat with less force than a gnat. That's right, read the first line. Oh no, can't. Your third's blind. Take it from the top one more time. Hold the image in your mind, stop before space-time unwinds, undress the cosmos like a clementine. I'm COE. You don't know me, but I'm sure you'll show me all the loops you want to throw me. But you'll never find a sound fallacy in my model of the galaxy, reconciling Hubble and relativity. Special! It's futile to run and check your browser. Mario, you're just my NPC, bitch, Bowser. Now settle down, reckless clown. Turn that frown upside down. Teach you what I've found. Please don't pry, lie, and try to change rules on the fly. I really wish you saw why. I won't beg you to buy. What I own can't be shown, only known and grown. No cash deal for divinity revealed. No shortcuts on this wheel.
Yeah, but just look forward in the dangers of e-personality. And he's an introvert, incel or whatever. And when he comes out on the internet, he has this, like the dark side of his subconscious becomes conscious. I mean, to me, it's obvious. That's what happens. It's what's happening to you on the same way. But your unconscious, your subconscious is different than Gandalf's subconscious.
Logic and science dictate that not only consciousness doesn't exist, consciousness is in fact scientifically impossible. And yes, it is going to involve math and calculus and science and computer programming. I'm sorry. And that have different implications of the process with the connection between the levels of a person's soul and how it reincarnates.
But I'm not going to spur on the issue because I'm not a woman. It's not my issue.
About how one day you're going to fulfill the Canadian dream and the American dream. So you watch Seinfeld and say, I could do it. And I'm going to go out tomorrow and go to work and have a great day, and I'm going to be successful. And one day I'm going to have my own apartment. I'm going to have my own parties with my own friends over, and I'm going to have my own possessions. I'm going to see things that I want and just buy them.
Yeah, but that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of yours.
Hello and welcome back to Week in Review with the one and only Doooovid. Happy to be here this post-Christmas stream. Pre-New Year's. Most auspicious time. Great to see some people already in the chat. Very excited to be here today. Hand it over to you, Doooovid, for the introductions.
Hey, good to be back. Good to get your creative juices there flowing. Good job with the rap. I have my draft of my song for Claire prepared, and a little more work on my song for Jennifer's theme song. Although maybe she'll create her own theme song. So not much super exciting this week. I just had the stream with Charles Moskowitz, so I guess got another YouTube strike, and he said he's now just going to other platforms, which is probably better for him because can talk about things that he wants to. I don't have to worry because he really likes to talk about those subjects that are going to bring him trouble with YouTube. So there's a little more drama with Politically Provoked. We might talk about that. See how relevant it was. We had Andrew Wilson, Big Papa Fascist, come on last week to give his perspective, and I guess the former alt-right Mike having some beef for their platforming of OV, even though he streamed with OV for hundreds of hours. His former streaming partner So irony there. So why don't I jump straight into a screen share just so I could clear these tabs off my window. I opened them up already. So not that eventful of a week, but you'll still have some few interesting things to share. So is that ready?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, God forbid, Handsome Truth and his GDL, Goyim Defense League, been active all around the nation. God forbid, they're taking their activity all around the nation. I was looking at ADL's page, and as part of this campaign, ADL's COE, not Church of Entropy, Center of Extremism. And I guess Church of Entropy also mentioned that COE would stand for Church of England. So I just noticed that Center of Extremism. So Rune in the chat, Shalom, thanks for joining. Okay, so Arjun, last week I was on talking with Ben Watkins about the soul. So I noticed he had Vedic geography with Sulubala, who I guess is from Australia. And it's interesting, it was somewhat related to the flat earth topic. And there's certain verse in the Vedas that makes it look like the earth is just a tiny percent of a larger earth. And so he talks about, the sources for the concept of the earth, like the pranas. He says that Vedic cosmology doesn't exist too much in the Vedas. It's more brought down in the pranas, the history, because the Vedas are more instruction and not history. And he had some pretty cool graphics. And so check that out. He also has his ebook for free online, Puranic Geography. So it's a subject definitely me and Jennifer have discussed in the past. Here, a cynical historian has a video on nationalism began in the 19th century, kind of just like what is nationalism, the current idea of the nation state, which is largely invention over the last 200 years that's anachronized going backwards. And then he linked this other video, alliterative, that has a whole hour and a half video, a whole bunch of etymologies of words like race and nation and like horse, and how we came to understand our concept of a nation. And so it's really, his claim is that the idea of the nation was largely an invention of historians, that historians were trying to create some sort of narrative. So they gave a narrative, which we call a social construct, of there being a definitive people that has some sort of common origin, going through trials and tribulations and travels over long periods of time, which may or may not be accurate. But the nation states came into existence largely over geographic territories about 200 years ago. What ancient nation states look like versus some sort of narrative like biblical Israel, where we're a nation of people of common ancestral origin. So it's pretty interesting video, importance of identity. I watched this useful chart channel. I watched like 25 of their videos on Friday, watched hours and hours. Here's one example of their video on the Mahabharata family tree. So you could see, for example, the Bhagavatam is narrated by Vyasa, Om Bhagavate, Om Nama Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Vyasa is telling the story to Parikshit, who is the grandson of Arjun in the character, and you have Krishna, who is the son of Vasudeva and Karna, and the interesting lineages and family trees. So the whole bunch of this channel is interesting. They also have a biblical series, but I found that one on the Mahabharata interesting and helpful. So here, Elon Musk had an interview on Babylon Bee. Not super interesting, but I thought I'd share that. Speaking of family trees, rabbi used to serve, and God forbid he passed away last year. And now his son is the rabbi, and others rabbis, the rabbi, like Doooovid, getting gray beard, gray hair, and these rabbis used to serve were these rabbis' sons, and now they have gray beards and are old. But the famous chalitza ceremony, which is like the Levirate marriage, where if a man dies with no children, his wife is supposed to marry his younger brother. But we don't do that. We don't do that. In the Bible, there's this ceremony that you could do. It involves like a shoe and like throwing a shoe or something. Some uh, special ceremony. So they performed this ceremony. I guess there was a case where a man died without any children, and it's, as opposed to her marrying his younger unmarried brother, that he performs this chalitza ceremony. So it's in Yiddish, but interesting biblical thing here. Two rabbis. So the Sklener Rebbe, who passed away a few years ago, I mentioned that. So now his son is now the Sklener Rebbe. Also, both of my rabbis now great. Like I studied under them. They're much younger than. And so this Rabbi Ungar's son, who was one of the people who recruited me to Baba Yeshiva, and so his Yecheskel Ungar married off his son. So this man was younger than me when he recruited me. I was probably like 21, and he was maybe like 18 or something like that. And he partly recruited me to Baba Yeshiva, where I studied. Then, the old rabbi from pre-war Europe, who grew up, God forbid, saw his family murdered in Europe and reestablished Baba Hasidus here in America. But Kesko Ungar has his own son who just married off now. And so there's a wedding, and the Sklener Rebbe also, who I studied under. I've sing lots of tunes from him dancing there. It also made me reminisce, think about the teachings. Like, so I studied under these rabbis. They're good people. I learned from them. But, like the teachings were more important than the rabbis, and the rabbis were important. But, at this point, geographically distant, I'm not so connected anymore. But, the teachings are definitely still with me. This week at the Royal Institute, the fundamental patterns that explain the universe, and he goes over 10 patterns, scientific patterns. Let me see if I can see the list. Cosmic radioactive. So, whatever, it's semi-interesting. It wasn't that good, but I've been sharing the weekly Royal Institute video each week. So I started doing push-ups again, getting a little more in shape. Like I haven't done push-ups in a long time. It's like 4 months ago, 3 months ago, maybe I first started doing it. I could hardly do like one or two push-ups. I was a little overweight. Now I'm close up to doing 50 push-ups spread out over the day. Did a set today, 15 push-ups straight. So I felt good about that. Try to get back into shape. I used to do 100 push-ups a day. So trying to get back up to like 100 push-ups a day, also doing sit-ups. And I saw a little history and science of the push-up. I guess the push-up came to America
Oh dear.
from a Hindu, an Indian, Great Gama, Jarek Vivilia. And I guess they have like the Hindu push-up, which is a little bit different than the American push-up. And although they claim that maybe Cicero in ancient Rome also had a push-up, and the value of the push-up as an exercise because it engages biceps, choriobrachialis, the serratus anterior, deltoid, rhomboid, trapezius, latimus dorsi, and triceps. Also been doing sit-ups. So, and combined with yoga stretches. So I shared that video last week. NASA just launched this new satellite into space, and so I mentioned maybe we'll go over this more in depth. So they have this Lagrange point, which was actually discovered by Euler, two of them, and then later um, Lagrange discovered the other three, which are points in the three-body gravital system where you could have a stationary object that will float along in the same position with the three bodies the whole year. And the purpose of the Lagrange point 2 here is that as the system rotates, this new satellite's going to be at the Lagrange point 2, and so the whole year will always be at this point. So to show the quick mathematics here, so basically it's not
Doesn't
that
that look like a bow and arrow so much?
Well, yeah, kind of, but it's just because they have the lines drawn connecting them. So it's not that actually that difficult to calculate. You can see Euler had already calculated Lagrange famous names, where you just you have the two different objects related to the third that have masses in radius, and then you could change one of the symbols based on the Coriolis force, and then set it to 0, and solve it for multiple different points, and it creates saddle points of temporary stability. So it's actually interesting that there's these two L5 and L4 points that are stable, relatively even more stable than L1 and L2. Whether we eventually try putting a satellite at L4 and L5, and then also the L3 stable point, which would be parallel to the Earth on the opposite side of the sun. So like there's a lot of science fiction stories about that, and we already have a satellite at the L1 point. So the L2 point is the point where this new satellite that just launched, that will take about a month to get into orbit, and it is a stability of about a month, but it has its own engine, so it should be able to stay with the fuel for about 10 years in the stability point. Here's a paper I found describing this stability of the Lagrange point for the James Webb Space Telescope, and so it mentions Lagrange, and you can see the kind of bow and arrow of the Earth in the Lagrange point, and the different formulas for the 5 Lagrange points. L4 and L5 are more complicated. L2 and L3 is just the difference of the minus sign, and then L1 and L2. And so you can see the distance. L2 is substantially further away from L1, and L2 is substantially further away from the moon, and will be able to be in a stationary place of so the Hubble telescope's 570 kilometers away from the Earth. Lagrange point 2 is 1.5 million kilometers away from the Earth, so it should be able to have quite a bit of good photography, possibly to see the cosmic radioactive or various light coming from different parts of the universe, according to the Big Bang theory, to be able to detect possible, their concept of the Big Bang, but all sorts of interesting data. And then it has a special, like I showed that video, a special shield where one side will shield it from the sun, and then the other side will collect all of the light coming from different parts in the universe. And so you look at the stability of the Lagrange points, and yes, it involves an eigenvector. And
I feel bad because I never even heard of this before, but I feel like I should have.
yes, I've tried to show you. If you want, you could click open the link and look at the formulas. We could talk about it more. It's very interesting, these Lagrange points 4 and 5 also. So the stability points at Lagrange 1 and 2 are less than a month, but they have an engine on it, so hopefully like every few weeks they'll be able to stabilize it in its position. However, the stability point of L3, which would be on the opposite side of the sun, is actually tens of years. And I guess they have science fiction novels where they claim that aliens or whatever have already put something on the Lagrange point three, and that we can't actually see Lagrange point three because it's directly opposite the sun. But the calculations, that's much more stable, and also Lagrange point four and five are actually more stable, and that's more based on the Coriolis force. And then if you have like the saddle points, if you see the stability maps of the three body orbit, that why it would be that you would have um, these stability points. So I mean, we have satellites that orbit the Earth, and then you have certain satellites that are set to stay the same position over the Earth at all times. That's based on something different than the Lagrange point. The Lagrange point is a solution to the three body rotation problem, where one of the objects is significantly less massive than the other two. So it's pretty interesting that they've launched this satellite. It's eaten up like a quarter of the NASA budget for almost a decade. And, God forbid, it was like $10 billion or maybe more, like $10 trillion. I think just 10 billion. But it's going to take about a month to get to its position. And, God forbid something could happen. It could, be destroyed and be a waste of money. So I thought that mathematics would be a little bit fun. If we, get bored, we could look at that more. Just because, the flat Earth debate. I think Arjun might be doing a flat Earth debate on Modern Day Debate also coming up.
It's just
So,
become like a rite of passage or something.
I guess that's just their programming for Modern Day Debate. So, how do you calculate the shortest distance between 2 points on a sphere? And have you ever heard of a Haversine? You say you actually took a class on sphere
I took a
programming.
class. I got an A plus. Very proud to say. Adored my professor. Yeah, spherical geometry. That's all it was. Basically, was the geodesics of the sphere, and obviously went into some other shapes, but it was all basically perturbations relative to sphere.
Yeah. So how do you calculate this? I mean, I was mentioning for like if you fly, and how do you know we're on a sphere? That when you fly to Europe from America, that you don't fly straight like you would looking at the map. You go north because the shortest distance on a sphere is it's a shorter arc length to go north. But there's there's different formulas for calculating the shortest distance between 2 points on the surface of a sphere, and so a Haversine is used for navigation, and a Haversine is basically um, a Verset sine is a trigonomical function found in some of the earliest trigonometric tables. The Versine of an angle is 1 minus its cosine. And so if the Haversine is half of theta, and half of theta uh, is the same thing as sine squared of theta divided by 2, or 1 minus cosine of theta divided by 2.
Hold up. I thought you want to know Vivian Veritas is in the chat, but just saying, it might not be the real one.
Or the one from
I'm considering
Luke,
density of trolls lately. Just saying.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if she wants to come on and talk, it's fine with me. Shalom, if that's you, it looks like your picture from before. And Tiffany also, if she wants to come on from Claire's. So that also, Tiffany, if that's you, you could. I'm not sure what the best way to contact you with a link. I mean, Vivian, if that's you, I mean, I have you on your Twitter, so I could send a link to you on your old Twitter if that's still whatever your word truth.
Are your DMs open on Twitter? Because that's probably
Yeah, my DMs are open on Twitter, so if Tiffany wants to pop on,
yeah.
That's fine.
At
Also,
Red Doovid, right? Maybe we can put that in the chat. It's just at REBDOOVID, right?
yeah. So we'll see if Tiffany wants to come on, or if that really is Vivian, if she wants to come on. I forget what your Twitter was, like truth something that you called yourself. But good to see you. Happy holidays. So yeah, this Haversine formulation of using the Haversine creates a somewhat simpler formula, and you can see it's not that simple. Just have the distance to calculate what the distance would be based on the longitude and latitude. That it's simpler, giving 2 points, the longitude and latitude. And here you could see that this would be a way of calculating the distance that's relatively accurate. The Earth is not quite spherical; it's somewhat elliptical. There's also the Vincentry formula.
Oblong spheroid, is that right?
Yeah, so maybe one day we'll actually go through this, just for the mental activity. But since you had that debate and basic mathematics, that I thought I'd go over that.
Oh yeah, it's
Oh
great.
yeah, true for live.
Guess what I was doing this week? I was looking at Euclid's Elements. Snooze fest. No wonder nobody likes math. Yeah, I'm pretty amazed at all these people in the chat. I guess our stream is a little comfy, isn't it? Gather round, everyone. The fire's all warm. It's all snuggly.
Okay, so if
want to keep
Vivian
going?
wants to come on and chat, I sent. She's still following me. Doovid follows nobody. So chat history. So it's been a while. So I'm not sure what you're up to, how your kid is doing, or you said you were talking with Daniel Sinklowitz. It doesn't sound good of all the people you could have been talking to, but God forbid, maybe that will relate to some of the politically provoked. I'm not sure if you're still friendly with the Godward podcast. Tiffany, see if you have a YouTube.
Yeah. So in these classes, they don't derive why it's a sphere. It's always just taken for granted, and this is the problem. And part of why these flat Earth debates can plausibly persist, right? Because at first glance, it's like, what the heck is going on? Isn't it obvious? But then you realize that you can't just purely reason it intuitively or empirically or whatever you want to call it. You have to make a leap at some point of logic. And if you've ever attempted to impart these abstract things to people, you realize not everybody can grasp even a simple notion like all fish are blue, Jim is a fish, therefore Jim is also blue within those confines, right? So back over to you, Doovid, and thanks again to all the people in chat. Nice to see you.
So
Antisocial contract and so forth.
Yeah, I sent Tiffany the link on. I sent Vivian the link on her Twitter. So if Tiffany you were the first chronicule this year. So if you have some way to contact you, or if you want to put I just see your YouTube, but I can't email your YouTube. So I'm not sure if you have Twitter, or if you want to come on to figure out where to send you the link. So
just have people DM you on Twitter. You're sounding too desperate.
Well, she might not.
Come on, dude. We're rappers now. We have to be cool.
Well, rap is somewhat part of African American culture, but rap is, it's basically just poetry, metered poetry. So these days, rap is considered part of African American culture, but it's not necessarily any direct connection that then that I guess they dominate the field, where it's indicative. But it was mentioned that the basics of rhyming and rapping doesn't necessarily have anything to do with African American culture, even though most rappers are most dominant from them. So did you want to do a quick version of your week in review, and then I will sing the Claire song?
I don't have a quick version of. I considered it a huge development that I'd actually managed to piece together semi sequential notes, but no, I couldn't summarize it. I could summarize why I can't summarize it, but even the explanation is, as you can see, taking quite long. But yeah, I can blab. It's not going to be coherent though.
But I'm just saying, like, were you on any streams? Did you put out any blogs? Did you do anything
No.
eventful?
I did a lot of thinking though, and I did a lot of writing actually. Towards, I don't want to say I'm writing a book because what I'm writing is not book quality, but hopefully, like getting up to there something between the blog and a book. So, not really doing much on the internet, but that's because I'm sort of receding into my shell to do some very deep analysis, which I have some little bit of notes on. Let me think here. But yeah, I would just be sort of launching into a lab session. So did you want to just do the Claire song right now while it's fresh, or what do you think?
Yes, I actually used for the hook line Lambies. Like I put just the rhyme. So like, did you use my strategy for coming up with your rap by just using the rhymes first, just creating a list of rhymes?
I prayed to God.
I mean, did you look for words and then use like a rhyming dictionary or web search?
No, God searched the words that existed for me, and then when we weren't sure, I just went on to thesaurus.com.
Yeah, I mean, so you use like the basic methods. I mean, that's the saying like start with the rhyming words, and then you could fill in the verses based on the rhymes. So I had mentioned some of the rhymes that I looked up for Claire.
Nah, it was more a feeling. It was more just like I went inside my heart and I was like, how do I feel? And then I got some rap lyrics about it.
So Lambie had put the verse that and so I decided to use that for Claire's hook because it sounded pretty good, and I used kind of like this Sabbath the Zemira, like a Dror Yikra. Not exactly sure, like I changed it around, but for some reason I was thinking Claire like a Sephardic Jewish Jewish tune, like Church of Entropy, kind of got me like this Hare Krishna tune. So this is kind of an adaptation of a Jewish Sabbath day song of Dror Yikra tune. So Claire Carr wants to lay down the law, giving lashes to the masses. Well, society collapses. So I took that was Lambie's line in the chat last week from it was just some rhymes for lashes, masses, collapses. So Lambie had Claire giving lashes to the masses while society collapses. So I thought that was pretty good and decided to make that the hook. Claire Carr wants to lay down the law, giving lashes to the masses. Well, society collapses. And so you like that chorus?
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like it would be really well accompanied by the harmonium, I think it's called, because it can kind of go to accentuate that.
Well, I mean, you had mentioned last week the lyra from I did your tune based on Hare Krishna chant, which would usually be accompanied by a harmonium, as opposed to this is more a Judeo chant that would be accompanied by something more like a lyra, which is a biblical instrument, possibly Greek, but possibly biblical origin instrument, and that's why I felt like Claire and her Quranism. So so I created a whole song, but Claire Carr wants to promote her idea of secular Quranism with Claire's fare of cynicism and narcissism. She previously flirted with fascism and loves to talk about white nationalism. Claire wants to restore the patriarchy from the current degeneration of Western society to matriarchy. Western society has collapsed from previous stable monarchy to no discernible hierarchy but corrupt oligarchy. Under Claire's framing and constant proclaiming, we need to bring back slut shaming. Claire keeps claiming she is naming all the current societal problems that are to blaming. Clerical wants to lay down the law, giving lashes to the masses, while society collapses. Therefore, Claire is not afraid to stream every day and to try to persuade. She has plots laid for unsuspecting incels' emotions to be played and get them caught up in the beta trade. But beware, Claire has a track record of betray. If she does not get her way, your stream she might raid. If your views won't be swayed, she will try every trick from flattery serenade to multiple personality masquerade,
Good one.
throwing every insult like grenades. Pity she has not convinced a single person even after a decade. But because she is smart and persistent, let's pray she will finally give up the charade and her delusions of grandiosity will fade. Clerical wants to lay down the law, giving lashes to the masses, while society collapses. That was the first time I tried singing that to work with that one. But I'd written out the rhymes. Maybe later in the show, I will do my updated version of your theme song.
Yeah, that was definitely dead on.
Clerical wants to lay down the law, giving lashes to the masses. While society collapses, Claire wants to promote her idea of secular chronism with Claire's flair of cynicism and narcissism. She previously flirted with fascism and loves to talk about white nationalism. Claire wants to restore the patriarchy from the current degeneration of Western society to matriarchy. Western society's collapse from previous stable monarchy to no discernible hierarchy but corrupt oligarchy. Under Claire's framing and constant proclaiming, we need to bring back slut shaming. Claire keeps claiming she is naming all the current societal problems that are to be blaming. Therefore, Claire is not afraid to stream every day and try to persuade. She has plots laid for unsuspecting incels' emotions to be played and get them caught up in the beta trade. But we beware, Claire has a track record of betray. If she does not get her way, your stream she might raid. If your views won't be swayed, she will try every trick from flattery, every trick in the book, including a flattery serenade, to multiple personality masquerade, throwing every insult like grenades. Pity she has not convinced a single person even after a decade. But beware, but because she was smart and persistent, let's pray she will finally give up the charade and her delusions of grandiosity will fade. Clerical wants to lay down the law, giving lashes to the masses, while society collapses. Okay, so there you go. Maybe Claire will see that, and maybe she'll like her.
There's no way
Gaffer.
she won't. She probably already has. People are clamoring for bongos. Harmonium, bongo,
She
mashup,
would have probably
when?
messaged me on Facebook if she was watching. She probably would have messaged me already on Facebook.
Oh, okay, I see. I see how it is. Is that your week in review?
That's my week in review. I have a updated, more refined version of your theme song, but we could save that for later.
Sure. Yeah, I've got a good song that comes to mind with bongos, and I'll share it. I definitely cannot play it. There we go. Thanks, Conops. All right, so it's my. I'm going to do my week in review then. Let's see here. I was noticing how the language. I've got Thad's YouTube up right now. The language that he's using, it's really interesting to see him kind of discover it because Were you gonna say something? Sorry, I thought I heard something. All right, yeah, it was just really interesting to see the language he's using because he's calling it disturbances. And that's the same, that's one of the translation for doshas. Do you know anything about Ayurveda? The medical science of Hinduism, quote unquote?
And we've talked about it quite a few times.
Because, yeah, one of the translations for dosha is a disturbance. No, sorry, he called it a derangement. So it's just really interesting that all these theories have the same kind of
Just
language.
being musical, I'm thinking disturbance, perturbance, like perturbation theory. And we were talking
Yeah,
about
exactly.
Lagrangian points, and so certainly you have a perturbation theory. I mentioned this real quick. I'm just putting in the chat here. We talk about it that alt-right Mike did use the voice modulator and auditioned to get on Politically Provoked under the moniker Lion of Zion, and then had like a falling out due to his old buddy OV. So maybe we'll talk about that more. But there I put in the link in the chat to his Lion of Zion tryout video. So I think Politically Provoked is going to go live at 8, and we'll probably be covering that. And now they're open the enemies over their platforming OV and Norvin, even though this guy streamed with like OV tens of times. And he was on Week in Review. I think he came on at least once. He used to appear in the chat. Calls himself Based Takes now.
All right, so I've had a lot of conversations with people, and various things get brought up. It's sort of hard to address them all at the time. And some people seem to want to jump to the conclusions about certain theories or worldviews not predicting stuff. Like, for example, divine solipsism. It actually predicts everything. It's just like you don't know how to infer predictions from that model. So to say that it doesn't predict anything, all you're saying is you don't understand how it predicts things is why there's this whole disallowance of negative assertions is the primary argument. So I just thought I'd have a look at some of the predictions of something even less esoteric, which is the least action principle. And so what I'm basically doing is you take our stationary action principle. If you want to look that up as it is on Wiki, you can assume you're sort of starting there, but rather than going in a line from one state to another, it's circular. So the beginning and the end is, there's quite a lot of noise coming through with scratching papers right now, Doovid.
Yeah, I decided that the least action principle was so important to your essence that I had included it, but then I actually I looked for rhymes and now have a whole stanza rhyming with least action principle in the new updated version of your theme song.
Well, thanks. That's great. Yeah, I really want to call it the least action principle, but then when I go to look it up, it's stationary action principle. I find that really doesn't roll off the tongue any better. Yeah, so what does the least action principle predict? I have additional conditionals on the least action principle, so everything has to be a cycle. So for the
Without
beginning,
looking it up, what does least action principle rhyme with? What rhymes with principle?
I'm not really sure if anything does. It's a pretty specific word.
Yeah, Ipple, there's not really anything. But Ibble, so like, sounds like, so even little, like little principle, little sounds a little like, but Ibble, there's quite a few words like invincible, impossible, accessible, responsible. So that I had to go with Ibbles, then I couldn't find Ibbles.
So in terms of what the least action principle predicts, I mean, on its own, it's hard to predict much. It's more abductive in the sense that it is a way to clarify previous theorems that have already been established to a greater degree rather than derive theorems on its own. What's this additional conditional of it goes in a cycle? It's obviously not going to be in the exact same time location because that doesn't make any sense, right? But there's a repetition that the state of the system as it re-enters the cycle is adjacent or whatever you want to call it to the original state in the sense that is actually meaningful to model it appropriately as a machine. So what does the least action principle predict? We was aliens type thing, like there was aliens consciousness that came to Earth and seeded life here because that takes less energy than it's starting spontaneously. And so you can also argue, well, life arising is just a prediction of panpsychism. So those would be two conflicting, slightly possibly different theorems. So you'd have to either prove they're the same theorem or prove which one's more correct. The state of enlightenment is latent rather than emergent because emergent requires more energy than latent. Reincarnation is another prediction of the least action principle because it takes less energy for a reused personality than a ex nihilo personality from my brain. Zombie philosophy, not cool. If you're starting to think about chopping up brains, you've left the domain of psychology, philosophy, and you've gone into the domain of, I was going to say psychopathy. Let's see here. Oh, another one was cosmological nihilism. A lot of interesting chats about that. I think it is important to look at these things because, speaking of Claire, she's always on about how nihilism is somehow a moral failing. Anyway, what do you think about that? Is nihilism a moral failing? Is it something people use as an excuse to sin?
I probably should have used nihilism in the rhyme with chronism. Maybe I'll change that.
So, no comment?
Well, I mean, if you fall into nihilism as like a school where you're a nihilist because your conclusion is that, I would say that nihilism is the logical derivation of materialism. So, you're going to fault the person for being a materialist or a nihilist. I'm not sure, say, say that the philosophy might have negative connotations for correct behavior or best action. So why is it? I'm just looking here in Wikipedia. They don't mention like the connection to Occam's razor, but why is Wikipedia called the stationary action principle? And I guess it actually has a formula. The least action principle even has the Lagrangian.
Why would they change the nomenclature? Your guess is honestly as good as mine. Like, total mystery. When I was in school, that's what they called it. It might just be one of those things that has a different name based on where you learn it. Because I never heard anybody call it anything but the least action principle. Not that it was discussed at any great length.
They have Maupertuis, Pierre Louis Marais de Maupertuis, who was maybe a contemporary or after Leibniz, and he has a principle of least action that Fermi is the first person that has light travels between 2 points along the path of shortest time, which is known as the principle of least time or Fermi's principle. And then you have Maupertuis principle. In the link, maybe Jennifer's French is better, who says nature is thrifty in all its actions. The law of movement and rest deduced from this principle being precisely the same as those observed in nature, we could admire the application to all phenomenon. The movement of animals, the vegetative growth of plants are only its consequences, and the speculate the universe becomes so much grander and beautiful, the worthier its author. The Euler gave a formulation of the least action principle as an integral that m in the form of a integral, and then Lagrange and Hamilton further developed it until Gauss and Hertz, that Gauss has the principle of least constraint. So I guess
That's
you'd
not a
have to
very good thing.
differentiate if you're doing like what would appear to be like the Maupertuis as that's similar to like Occam's razor, that just the simplest solutions most likely be true to um, actual law of physics that appears to be better defined as the stationary action principle as opposed to the least action principle, and it's actually expressed as an integral. The action in Lagrangian stationary axiom is not always a minimum, despite the historical name of least action. It is a minimum principle for sufficiently short, finite segments in the path, in terms of like path integrals. So I'm not sure if you popped up that wiki or if you've done that research and or if you thought about that.
What in particular, the calculus definition of the least action principle?
Well, the stationary action principle.
Well, it's the same thing, isn't it?
No, because I think it. I mean, so are you saying something philosophical, or are you saying something mathematical? Because the least action principle looks like it's originally a philosophical statement, and then later becomes a principle of physics, and is formulaic, and probably due to what it's saying about physics, it's better phrased in terms of as the stationary action principle. And I mean, so what are you talking? Are you saying something philosophical? Or are you saying something mathematical? Are you saying something about the nature of Newtonian physics?
No.
Or are you saying something philosophical about the nature of truth? Or both? And if what you're saying about truth, does that the same laws, mathematical exact formulation, you're saying, would you be able to apply that to philosophy?
Well, you can try. That's what philosophy is in theory. It's just a matter of whether it works. And I'm just having a real hard time loading this picture right now. I guess because it's gigantic. There we go. Don't know why. For some reason, this picture is absolutely huge. So now I've got
Wikipedia even brings about like the hero of Alexander, and you're just historically people noting that it's like what's going to be the shortest path or the shortest distance, and saying if something has multiple paths, that call like the true path as the least distance path, or least action. What is action? Action isn't really a physical property like a least energy principle, but what is the definition of action? So physics action is a numerical value describing how a physical system has changed over time. But what are the units of action? Is action a form of energy? And to why that would have been rephrased as to stationary, and how you have this equation where you have a starting point that would be a calligraphical S of a physical system. It's defined as the integral of the Lagrangian L between two instants of time, t1 and t2, technically a function of the n generalized coordinates q, q1 through qn, which are functions of time, and define the configuration of the system. So you have
let me give you a bit of an intuition here. Do you remember when you discovered that the integral of x squared was a third x cubed, and integral of x cubed was a quarter x to the fourth, and that was kind of like mysterious? Like, why is that true type thing? you understand what I mean? Like, why is it that? Why is the integral of a power of one higher power divided by the power? It just doesn't seem, it's not self-evident, but it's true. And it's like, okay, there's just something perfect going on in numbers. To me, the
Well, when
least
you
action
take-
principle is kind of the same idea. I'm just trying to
Well,
give you an
I'm saying-
intuition for it.
So I mean, mathematically, the least action principle is just going to be delta S equals 0. I mean, delta S equals 0.
Exactly. The deviation from the pure state is nothing. But it's just like, what is the pure state, right? It's the ideal forms and all the perturbations, all the relevant adjacent and semi-adjacent perturbations. Well, what's that, right? It's like mushroom. Apples.
Well, I mean, you can just, to answer your question, I mean, like when you first take calculus or even in pre-calculus, you have the long version of the formula for like the limit of x plus h, where h is tiny, divided by, to review the formula, and then you plug it in, and you could solve for the generalized solution to a derivative. So if you plug in x to the n, eventually you'll see that it equals the derivative that equals n times x to the n minus 1. I mean, you could actually solve that and demonstrate that by the definition through the limit definition of what a derivative is.
Oh, I know you can derive it. That's not what I was talking about. I was talking about the fact that it has a certain beauty to it, a simplicity to it. It doesn't have to be that cogent, does it? But it is.
Well, I mean, if you just say, okay, derivative, what does it mean? And you say, okay, it means the slope of the line at any given point. And then, so you have a formula, and the derivative that gives the slope of the line is going to be a formula. And then there's a simple permutation that can give that when you do the long method of how do you mathematically go about it, and then to saying that there's a simple formulaic understanding or like a recipe, a permutation that you could do to any binomial to get the derivative. I mean, even to say like whether it's beautiful or not, or the joy of figuring things out, or the beauty of the simplicity of ideas is somewhat irrelevant. Saying like
Well, you don't decide what's relevant.
Well, I mean, whether if you learn that in like half the some in the class, the student thinks that's beautiful, another person doesn't care.
There's a lot of bullies who go around saying it doesn't matter how beautiful it is. That's not indicative of anything. It's like, first of all, you're asserting a negative, and second of all, you're not expert on what's right.
Well, I mean, beauty is subjective. So I'm saying
beauty is a sign that you're on the right track. It's not a guarantee that you're right, which a lot of times, like the Leibnizian type people, they would sort of say it's true because it's beautiful.
That's a philosophical statement. I'm saying no.
That's a mistake too. I think
the least action principle is saying
and
that
here's some beautiful stuff about it is more the way you'd expect that.
If you're going to define simplicity as beauty, that no, I'm saying that beauty isn't necessarily the simplest. You say, no,
that's what I'm saying. It's not the sole attribute, right? It's like a question of what attributes are accepted in the, cardinal archetype or whatever.
Yeah, so beauty is not an accepted axiom of math or science. Like
it used to be, and it's pretty easy to appeal to, and a lot of people already accept it. So.
Yeah, you either get the right answer or the wrong answer, and whether it looks pretty or not. Some of them are.
Yeah, but the only stuff that gets remembered life on lifetime, if society completely burns to the ground, is the pretty stuff, because that's the stuff people love. They don't really care about the brute force stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's accurate. I mean, if you mean the masses, or saying, no, people aren't going to remember. So maybe you have a few historical references to like beautiful answers that unfortunately were wrong.
Wrong, right? But there's no, they're not able to be wrong in any real sense, because the alternative answers aren't right. They're literally comically wrong. So I have the trilemma, the Epicurus trilemma, defeated now. Got that on my Mohit Adana. You talking about Doooovid, I suppose? How do you know so much? Said Doooovid. Research? Did you want to answer? Or no? Too abstract?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Well, someone in the chat is wondering how you know so much, I think.
I mean, study. Nothing
Study.
complicated. Study.
Oh, I had somebody try to bully me with autism. That was weird. I didn't know what that was. It just made me feel really sad for all the people who've had to deal with that. He's like, you're autistic, right? And so I said, okay, just to sort of go along with, just wanted to see where it was going. And then within like 10 minutes, he's like, don't be so autistic. So I was like, what does he want? So I tried to like go through the entire conversation and try to understand it. It was great. So I finally, got my whole, whatever you want to call it, theory. I think the theory can literally work in real time, almost at this point. It's a little bit harsh, but it seems to be almost, I don't want to jinx it with flawless, but ooh, it was really good. So I felt happy that I was able to help someone who's clearly in a very bad state. I guess, if letting myself be insulted for like about 5 minutes is enough to make someone feel good on Christmas, then it's worth it. But I guess what I'm hoping for a New Year's resolution is that people will see the value in not just heaving whatever dog shit pops into their frontal cortex at a given moment in a given conversation, and maybe consider not relating through manipulation and toxic empathy. And like, it honestly does feel like bear baiting. And so it's like, yeah, for a while you go out to defend a principle, but there's no real incentive to stick around. And then people wonder, like, why does the scene blow? It's like, get a mirror. It's your own harshing. So I basically have this, like, whatever, two-pronged approach that I think would work. And I know people get upset about this, but there really shouldn't be unsolicited advice. And people should maybe learn to like rephrase it as taking responsibility for stuff rather than pushing it on others. Because for me, like over a while, I've just become definitely overreacting. And people, love to take the piss or whatever. But at the end of the day, really, there shouldn't be any inclination to impose your stupid, bullshit, nonsensical opinions on other people. Really, what we should be doing is supporting other people to do self-improvement. And that's not what's happening. It's literally the opposite. So the vibe of the culture could be summarized as literally like, think about that rap that I played at the beginning. It is kind of a joke, but at the same time, who doesn't it apply to? Right? Like, is it good that things go like this, and that basically the fixation of so many people seems to be for me to need to admit that there's something wrong with me. Just think about that for a minute. How long would you have broken if that was how people were treating you? How long would it have taken you to break and just go along and say, yeah, you're right, there is something wrong with me? That's kind of like in the Matrix with Morpheus, when they break you and it's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll let you mind my empathy. And then it's like, okay, congratulations, the psychopaths won. And it doesn't take a lot of energy to let the psychos win, and then they just sort of run roughshod, and then when shit hits the fan, well, they're nowhere to be found, because the only thing they're really good at is heaving and wailing. Not actually, that's only a facsimile of empathy, which is what people are picking up on. It's like, oh, well, if you're, spurging on such a small thing, you must have more empathy than me, therefore I have to bow to your moral high ground. It's fake. So the least action principle predicts that it's totally fake. So if someone is trying to empathy mine, they're not doing it on purpose, but it's an accurate model to assume that it's a psychopathic motive. I.e., they don't care about your empathy. They're trying to mine your empathy. Slave maker ants, just look it up. That's precedent in biology. It's just like, oh my God, look at me. Ah, listen to me. Ah. It's like, I'd love for you to be right and to be able to indulge this temper tantrum, but you're lying. So I'm not going to allow you to, I'm not going to be party to you lying to yourself. Like, I have to draw a line somewhere. It's a moral boundary for me. I'm really happy that I got a chance to articulate it, and all the people who have all these like seriously sad situations feel like good enough to trust me to, you know, share that. And the other side of it, so that's my little synopsis on moral empathy mining. There you go. So it's LARPing as a moral authority, empathy mining, becoming basically enslaved to somebody else's moral edicts, and then you're just always playing defensive, like, oh, actually, I'm really moral. It's like, yeah, I could have gone along with that any time, but no. Why? Love my devotees too much. Okay, so intellectual high ground. How is that illusioned, Michael? Retarded objections. Excuse me. Use the R word to take it all back. Absolutely unscrupulous objections. Minutia. You see it all the time. So the implication is, oh, you criticize me, therefore you have deeper insight than me. No, it's just fake. It's all just bullshit. To seem smart. Ooh, look at me, I'm smart. Ooh, look at me, I can bring objections. It's like, this is why you have to have a qualification to participate in a debate. Otherwise, it's going to turn into somehow the argument's being made that a half of a sphere is equivalent to a sphere in terms of metaphysical complexity. Yet, metaphysics isn't real. The joke is that that's the joke. The joke is that that's not a joke. Okay, yeah, so hopefully that helps people get a little bit of insight into dealing with people who, it's not that they're bad people, they just don't care about what they do when they have cognitive dissonance. And some people are just more in touch with things in the sense that they don't forget what happens. And most people just purge everything, do something absolutely terribly embarrassing and horrible, forget about it, everything just back to zero on the next day, if the majority of people are forgetting. You're the weirdo for remembering, even if what you're remembering is perfectly accurate. So if anyone's wondering how my Christmas went, I would probably have to say it's the best Christmas ever. And I hope everybody else's is as inspiring as mine. Hey, I got the rap song. Like, that literally took 2 hours or maybe 3. I'm not usually that productive, especially not right before a show. And anyway, I think that might be it. I thought we'd have people coming on.
I sent this link to, I'm not sure if Vivian, looks like she just said hi, so she's probably not coming on. Tiffany, I don't know how to reach her anyways, but she might have left. Mohit Adhana, I sent him the link on Lee Chess. So he reached out to me earlier today looking for a chess coach. So I thought he was a kid. But it turns out, I guess he's grown up. He's a mechanical engineer and in India. And if he wants to come on and talk a few minutes, he said it's like 7 in the morning there in India. But if you want to come on and introduce yourself, I coach a lot of people on the internet, just give basic advice. Most of the people I talk with are minors, so I wouldn't have them on the stream, or you'd need the parents' permission or something like that. But Mohit is an adult, so if he wants to come on and introduce, we don't talk too much about chess. But this one chess player, actually like a child prodigy from Russia, was messaging me today about concentration. So I was telling him that concentration for chess is general mental technique of meditation. That you could look at chess as a form of meditation because it requires intense mental control and concentration. But he was like, his goal was to improve his chess play, and he was mentioning that his one of his biggest problems is his lack of concentration. So I was telling him about basic meditation to help improve his concentration skills. But he's like a 14-year-old kid, so I wouldn't invite him on the stream. But Mohit, is a grown man with a degree in mechanical engineering. So if you want to come on and say hi, feel free. Exciting to, me and Jennifer both have Hindu leaning. So also if you want to, give a little theological basis. I returned a little bit to my study of Hinduism. I think I'm going to have on probably maybe this week, but probably the week after, Henry Doktoretsky again, and we'll talk about his 10-part book series that he's now halfway complete. But I think Jennifer's somewhat trying to do a similar thing to what I'm trying to do with multiple truth hypothesis, because the least action principle or stationary action principle is at the crossroads between.
It's kind of just some bullshit, and then I put in my own opinions right after, like with Platonism.
Well, I was saying
But
it's
it's
at the
definitely the
crossroads.
closest. It's definitely the closest thing to what I'm saying in the extant literature.
Well, I was saying it's at the crossroads between math and science and philosophy. That you have historical things like Occam's razor or ideas in philosophy to something that is actually a mathematical law of science, like that could be used for engineering and for practical description of the material world, like for the predicting the path or describing the path of an object in physical space. Hence the stationary action principle, least action principle, that could be used formulaically in purely mechanical terms, and it even has uses in quantum mechanics and simple, it started in Newtonian physics, that you could use the least action principle in Newtonian mechanics to predict the motion of an object. To use that to something more philosophical, or is so to say beyond the realm of mathematics, but like even logic, like Ben Watkins, you can have all these logical proofs of God, but like what does it mean? Like, no, I proved God. Like look at my proof again. Like the logic is set, the formula works. It's like like do you really prove God? Like through one of these proofs, and something philosophy should be logical, but it comes down to axioms and the assertion of axioms, and how do you derive the truth of these principles. And so multiple truth hypothesis is similar to using mathematics that is known use for some material laws, and certainly like computer programming, machine learning for things like truth discovery functions, that saying applying that to a larger picture, to things that is really beyond what it can be applied to, but like as a thought experiment. So I think in a similar realm, that's what Jennifer's doing with the least action principle.
Well, at first it predicted the sphere because the whole minimizing the torque about the center, that argument is to me the same as the least action principle. It's a minimizing of the action of the torque, and the torque is because we understand everything is vibrational. Well, we understand everything as quantized vibrational systems, and so each individual quantum would have its own torque.
Well, I'm saying that the least action principle is, I don't know. It's not like a law in physics, but it's a
principle, right? So
yeah, I'm saying, and you could use it to do things like derive a shape, like a sphere, and that the sphere, if you limit.
Well, that's the thing. You can't. You can try, but it's only validated when someone else sort of embraces the utility of what you've said.
No, you could plug it into the formula like ds equals 0, and
yeah, but then it's down to whether you've defined S accurately, which is a bit of a shot in the dark.
No, I'm pretty sure that you could use the least action principle to derive trajectories of objects or even shapes of objects. We use that in engineering.
You need additional conditionals than just least action principle. It's too generalized on its own. Mark Smith
Well,
has
it's
to
just a
attend to his.
formula that finds a minimum. So I mean, just like the Lagrangian points, that for the three body problem, you find the 5 Lagrangian points just by setting the equation equal to 0, and then there's 5 different solutions.
And how can you be guaranteed that the Lagrangian is the correct representation of the action potential of the system?
Why, saying you just set the equation to 0 and solved it.
Yeah, that's presupposing
If
the
you have a
equation's right,
three-body,
though.
well, I mean, the Newtonian equation for celestial mechanics is right. The GMM
It
divided
fails at
by
r equals 0. I mean, that's the whole point of bringing in this extra baggage in cosmological understanding is the G fails at r equals 0.
yeah. But I'm saying we just spent $10 billion and we're sending a satellite to this Lagrangian point. And saying it's the Lagrangian point that Euler, that where we're sending the satellite to, that Euler had solved for this 300 years ago. I mean, it's called the Lagrangian point, but like where the satellite is going, that Euler solved for this point, that it's called Lagrange because he fully solved the equation. That's the L4 and L5 and L3. But the Euler had already solved for L1 and L2 300 years ago. They already had science fiction novels about sending objects to those points going back over 100 years. And we already have, for decades now, satellites at Lagrange 1. And now we just sent this past week a satellite to Lagrange 2. So okay, the formula, sort of say that, I mean, say we'll see whether it works or not. To say whether it's true or not, they say it can't be absolutely true because the equation breaks down at 0. But like, no, I mean, we believe with absolute
We
confidence.
can't even tell if it's absolutely true relatively. We just know that it's making a prediction. It's the most accurate thing. It could easily be displaced by something more accurate, but one would have to justify a more complex understanding of gravity. Why do we need to know about gravity past just what a planet does?
Yeah, I mean,
That
based
hasn't
on the
really been
mathematics,
articulated.
no one knows whether you could put a satellite into Lagrange 2 stationary and whether it'll stay there. And so the mathematics predict that if you get an object to this Lagrange point 2, that it will be stable there within little, like I say, like every month it has to be readjusted, and so it needs fuel. But if you could get an object to Lagrange 2, that with a minimum amount of fuel and energy, it will be able to stay there for over 10 years. And saying that's Euler's solution to Newton's equation, that GMM divided by r squared. So like in practicality, we believe so much that this is going to work that we just sent a satellite to this point. So, I mean, you reject that Lagrange point 2 should be a stable place in orbit where the satellites should be able to stay in a stationary position.
You're presuming that the results of the theories are mutually exclusive, which is ridiculous, as any more correct theory simply subsumes the prior extant one, as the way it's described by Thad, that the prior answers are merely limit points of the correct answer. Prior understanding is subsumed into the greater understanding when they're both true, quote unquote. Because, like, what does it mean to be true, right? Like, how close can we get to actually reflecting the universe's base frequency or however you want to describe that?
I mean, it's like calculus. Okay, there's two things. There's the truth of calculus, and then there's the truth of Newton's laws of celestial mechanics, which is just one formula. The GMM divided by r squared. So that's basically for this the only postulate that this principle of for the three body problem, and then using the laws of algebra and calculus to set it equal to 0 and determine that there's going to be a stability point. And when it's solved, there's 5 stability points, but one of these stability points we're calling Lagrange 2, and it's a simple solution of the formula. And so to say that we're going to test it, by sending a satellite there, and we're going to see whether it's actually a stable point and whether that satellite will stay in stationary movement. I mean, you have doubts that Lagrange point two. I mean, if you use the word true, that saying you still have like a true function, like maybe we're in a holographic projection, or all the uncertainty, maybe it's a hoax. But from what we know of truth, that the truth value function of Newton's equation of celestial mechanics is quite high, and of the Lagrangian solution for the stability points is quite high, and so I'm predicting that the satellite will reach its destination, and it will work. It will be able to record data and send it back to Earth.
Yeah, probably. Seems fair enough. I am not disagreeing on that at all, and I didn't mean to make it sound like I was. I
I
will
did. I mean, you
show
sound
you
like
what I
Gandalf
was.
or something on like environmentalism, but I'm saying this is even more clear than like global warming or something like that, because it's like really comes down to one single formula in the simple laws of algebra and calculus, like I showed at the beginning of Week in Review, the simple formula that even a high school student could solve for Lagrange point two.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure what we're arguing about here, to be honest. What is there a disagreement here? I was wanting to get to the heart of how accurate math can be and why. And you started with calculus. And
Well, I mean, because I compared what you were talking about, the least action principle, the multiple truth hypothesis. The least action principle is a mathematical formula that will determine uh, the shortest distance that an object could travel, and you could make the equation quite complicated. You could use the stationary action principle, to calculate something quite complex for an engineering purpose to determine, what so even the satellite, that how the satellite is being got to Lagrange point two was basically the stationary action principle. It's probably even the formula that they used, or one of the formulas that they used to determine the motion that they're using to get the satellite to that point. They're talking about something like that, where I'm talking. This is pure physics and math, like the least action principle as applied to the biggest news story of the week, the satellite being launched into space. Versus a more theoretical, and I mean that's even theoretical, but it's practical because we launched this, it's happening, versus something more subjective like philosophy or religion trying to use the least action principle to derive philosophical truths.
I would say more like using it as a cudgel to instantiate irreproachable authority. That aside, can you see what's on the screen right now?
No.
All right, I've got a comparison, and I think I've shown you this diagram before, but yeah, I don't know how familiar you are with the notion that the quantum mechanical periodic table is a space-time event.
Maybe I've heard you say that before. I mean, maybe you just mean a space-time event that it occurs in three-dimensional space at time, or your three plus one, as you would.
Well, if we
it.
just stick with the extant models, we don't look at my model, we have an event defined in relativity as the square of the length plus ct squared. That's a well-defined thing. So basically, there's three classes of space-time events. There's the light-like, time-like, and space-like, I think. I could be wrong on those, so correct me if I'm wrong, anyone who knows. But there's three classes, and it has to do with whether they're material, which means they're not able to travel faster than the speed of light, or if they're light, i.e. the electromagnetic spectrum, then they have to be traveling at speed of light in a vacuum, asterisk, right? So proportionally dialed back depending on the medium, or they're faster than the speed of light. And this seems like, oh, isn't that impossible? It's like, well, the phase velocity of light is actually greater than c, because the planar velocity of light is c, but the wavefront velocity, technically, if you're counting it from the perspective of the wavefront, it's 2 pi times c, I think. Anyway, the idea being that once you're superluminal, if that is possible based on the interpretation, that it's not possible to slow back down. Coming back to what I was saying, we could argue, okay, well, both these interpretations on the left, we have the periodic table, quantum periodic table. On the right, we have the traditional understanding of a space-time. And we can say, well, they're both true. They're both information positive. But which one's right? Well, whether we can say one is absolutely true or not is sort of, that's not the first step. The first step is which can we derive from the others. So you can derive the traditional understanding using mind, just put an axis through mind, rotate the object around the axis, and you get what's on the right. See what I'm saying, Doovid?
Yeah.
So the standard understanding of the space-time event, that's basically my thing, but integrated through a model of vibration. So see
which
how,
would be, I mean, if you actually want to put an integral formula, that would be, like rotating a two-dimensional shape around the three-dimensional axis, which was usually done by timesing it times x, or whatever your variable is, and integrating it like the formula for a sphere. You get 4 pi arc.
this doesn't work though, because it's pre-spatial. So this defines the conditionals on spatiality. It isn't subject to them. We wouldn't be able to take a derivative any more than an integral, but we can use the concept of rotation. But we, doesn't actually, I don't know, it doesn't mean anything. It's just sort of it's like an information thing. It's, as you rotate it, you lose the precision, you lose the resolution of the balls as you rotate it. And that's sort of a metaphor for what's happening. You can think of things as starting at the periodic table and then descending from it. And we're a very low super descended vibration of a fundamentally similar structure, which is called the space-time event, which is this figure 8. I can put maybe a better diagram. That's not the best one, but I wanted to just bring people's attention to the idea that it's very much a geometric argument, and that in and of itself doesn't establish whether, well, they can't both be absolutely true because one's derivative of the other, but it doesn't establish one on the left is absolutely true. That you need to come up with other conditionals to assert that and say, well, if it meets all these conditionals, then yeah, we're going to say it's absolutely true, but it may seem like it is. That's where the problem starts. When you just assume something's a fact, it seems like it's true. It's like, well, it has to be true because it represents the periodic table. It's like, yes, but we probably want to actually tease it out a little more to make sure it's not just one of those free will mirages again. Oh boy. Anyway, I have something else to show, but I'm going to, okay. It looks like Vivian's still in the chat, so if you're not, or if you're feeling up to it, come on and say hi. No worries if you're not up to it, though. I'm just going to add, I think it's probably better if I just add this image. Can you just talk for a minute while I grab it for some reason I didn't download this extremely important image for the least action principle. Now you're grilling me on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Mohit is joking, saying that your picture looks like a jar, to like suppose our universe is in a jar. And yeah, so I mean, we talked about a few weeks ago, like emergent qualities, and when we're talking about quantum computing, and that possibly there'd be emergent qualities that would be derivatives. So if you like the laws of mathematics, even something like calculus or space and time, I'm not sure if philosophically, if you'd say like an essential versus an emergent quality. And if it's an essential quality, or it's an emergent quality, saying that it's not essential, but it emerges from something that's essential, and whether, in fact, there are any essential qualities, and, how would, looking at like axiomatic systems of principles that you want to reduce the principles to as few as possible, especially if they could, so to say, derived, if they could be derived, then, shown that they're emergent qualities of something else. And if it's, like the quantum periodic table, uh, if you thought about that maybe as, there'd be like similar to the solution for the Lagrange points, that they would be local minimum or maximum related to a solution to some other type problem, and that the elements on the periodic table are in essence just stable points, and so they're emergent qualities. That definitively, it's not essential that you have these periodic elements. They're just stable points that emerge from a more deeper truth.
Well, I'm glad you see it that way. That's kind of a relief. What I was gonna say what changed, but I guess it maybe doesn't feel like something changed. All right, I was trying to find my diagram here, but here we go. The measurement limit. It's the thing I'm sort of the most clumsy with explaining, because I think I just don't understand what it is that people aren't getting. Memes, you gotta come on here and help me out. So at least I'm not the only one who doesn't know what they're talking about on the show. Let's see here. I'm just having trouble multitasking. Okay, here we go. And I've got all these different little drawings here. The argument is that you can derive a bunch of different machines and geometries, and that this superset structure, if you will, is sort of the template reality for all substructures. That makes sense? So we're like that, but collapsed many, many times. Keep coming back to this notion of waveform collapse. It's like, what does that mean? Or wave function collapse, right? We got the math eggheads obsessed with these functions. What does it mean for me to collapse? Well, it means it's going from the purely abstracted state where there's equal potential in all of the possible states, and it's completely meaningless in the sense that we define meaning, to all super specific to just carbon based, but still existing within the greater template reality, i.e., what defines us essentially is a space-time event. And then it's like, well, what's a space-time event? Well, it's like, it's something that obeys the measurement limit. Well, what's that? It's like 3 + 1. It's like, well, what's that? Like apple mushroom hyperbolus? Like, I don't know. I think it's pretty compelling, and that's all I have to say on that for now. Yeah. Is it the least action principle? I don't know what exactly its connection is with the least action principle, but I wanted to show how I would work this out. I don't know if you can see the stupid.
Are you still in the dualistic measurement limit?
No, I've got something new here. I just shared it. It's not great. It's starting with an amorphous blob, which is shape 1 on the top left. So it's just a total blob, and the idea is to follow the way it evolves. So you don't even presuppose geodesity. You don't even presuppose at the beginning that it's in a geodesic array. You're trying to make as little assumptions as possible. The only thing you're really assuming is, well, it's possible to meaningfully draw a boundary around my system. And my system has gravity, and therefore it's going to arrange itself in such a way as to minimize that associated torque, which is going to bring the system into a spherical array. But then it can still have a lower energy state, because if it, instead of being a flat sphere, it's a waveform, that means it actually has a larger surface area. if it's vibrating, because it goes from being 1 to pi, I guess. It's like, what's the ratio of the length of a curve for sine theta? Like, sorry, what's the ratio of the diameter and the circumference of a circle? I should know this. It's pi, right? It's pi. Yeah, I just checked. Pi d is the. See, this is the stuff I should really have on a list on my wall. Yeah, so you get pi greater efficiency if your system, and again, this is a model, a two-dimensional model, because the three-dimensional equivalent is very hard to visualize, but rather than it just being a circle, it's a circle vibrating, and therefore you get a longer perimeter. You see what I'm saying with my shape number 3? Do it? No? Hello? I want to see if you're following. Am I off on Mars again?
I'm following, but
Do you see what the logic is, how the logic is going? And you're saying that you're conserving, it's less energy to hold the system in configuration 3 than in configuration 2? Dude, thank you. I'm dying. Do you have any idea how hard? I wish this is so hard right now. Thank you so much. And Doooovid, thank you also for your excellent questions. I'm just, oh my God.
So of course, you started talking about something that I found very interesting, because while I was playing around with some different things, I was putting together a video about that I've meant to do for a while about how I stumbled across the best theory of everything yet. I surfed the algorithm a little bit more. I did a little more exploring. I started playing, and then you mentioned some things that really seemed to stand out to me, because where is this? Diagram, blah, blah, blah. Hold on. I apologize. I literally was just playing with spheres. All right, where are we? Yeah, that's that. But no, you were discussing things that very often we use, what do they call, Riemannian spheres to model different stuff and things. Where the heck did I put this? God, too many windows. All right, here we go. But it's the sheer fact that we literally have like the libraries of Alexandria back in the day, except like you don't need to go find the books and talk to all the different librarians that have been there for years. You can kind of search for it yourself, and if you get stuck, you actually ask other people that have actually searched around. So now we can like leverage, I don't know, humanity. Here we go. All right. So I did a little plotting because I just looked it up in Wolfram Alpha. And normally to generate a Riemannian sphere, you do x squared plus y squared plus z squared equals 1. And it generates a sphere. So you were talking about the principle of least action. Okay. And if we're going to operate under the assumption or something along those lines that the complement of the hyperbolic figure 8 knot is essentially the simplest balanced manifold, it's like, okay, well, where's the little share thingy? Here we go.
The idea is to reverse engineer, okay, aka
yeah,
do the thing we don't like doing with logic. The conclusion we know.
Well, if you have a good hint, I think it helps. And if Mother Nature gives it to you, why the heck not? So, okay. So what I did
Here's
is
the thing that we want to find the way to word it so that it can lead to all the things we already know are true.
Right.
So
and we generally attempt to do it.
What is it that predicts both a sphere? What predicts both a sphere and the HF8 complement? And I was thinking, and I've put this out, I think already once, but I'll do it again. If you cut that section in the center, if you cut that, does that turn the object into a sphere? Like, does the sphere then, or sorry, does the object then find another stable point that resembles a sphere? Putting it out there for people who are better at this topic than me.
I essentially, that's kind of the question that I've been thinking about for the past day or so is, how do you actually get gravitational collapse into a black hole? Because if you're going to go into this,
there are no singularities for the quadrillionth time.
No, I did not say singularity, Jen. I said black hole. Thank you for pounding that through my head that they are not the same thing.
Okay, gravitational maximum.
Okay, gravitational maximum
There you
to
go.
collapse into like an HF8 or HF8C
It
in
doesn't,
this.
though.
And that
It's
would
an energetic maximum, dear. It's not a gravity maximum that collapses in HF8. It's an apple, man. I said apples are nothing like the conditions that bring forth apples, nothing like the conditions that bring forth, quote, black holes. Okay, what they are the points adjacent to what happens in the regions of maximum density. How do we know it's a region of maximum density? Because it's shitting out stars. That's the whole clue, right? Why did a star get created? Well, because of a gravitational collapse.
I thought it was Planck mass divided by Planck length. Or whatever the equivalent for a sphere is. I think it's like 4/3 pi r, so it'd be half a Planck length squared.
I'm sorry, I'm
See,
lost.
I think the Apple thing is based upon like probably the internal action, like I was kind of saying, like, and again, I have absolutely no evidence for this whatsoever, but I'm just thinking, I'm like, okay, if there was some type of internal action, that twisting point focally there, I mean, might that generate what we kind of view as like the path interval, or just or the wave function of the power cosmic or something like that, and like
Okay, you've
I
got
feel
it
like that's how we would
backwards.
get
You've got it
apples.
backwards. You understand the physical process. You understand the
Which
mathematical processes. You pluck the mathematical processes from the basis of knowledge to the other basis of knowledge of physical processes that you understand. You don't pick and choose the mathematical processes you like and then try to force physical processes into those templates.
you work with what we know rather than being like, this sounds good, and
No,
I can
you
kind of
try.
okay.
You do a literature review. Like it's not that hard to do a mathematical literature review. Excuse me. It's hard to understand math. Like it's just hard to get to the point where you can actually do, a triple integral or whatever it takes to solve these electromagnetic field equations, epsilon delta stuff. Like to have that recall, to then go and do a literature review on a philosophical history of math is not that cognitively taxing compared to learning all the math, right? But then where do we go from there, right?
So what I found was interesting is I just did this. It's rather than assuming 1 for the volume, I put in, and again, this isn't the exact number. I should probably do that in a second. Basically, the volume of the hyperbolic
This
figure
is
eight, not
honestly not a
complement.
good idea to get into unless you can explain your reasoning here, because we don't want to cause more harm than good, and confusing people is harmful. So, can you explain what you're doing here?
I'm just taking the answer, which one is in the imaginary plane, one is in the real plane. So this, I believe, is a complex answer. So it's I just found
That's just a
this
bunch of
interesting.
words.
It looks kind of like gamma. Getting within it. Let me
I
actually
don't even know what gamma
stop
is. I'm sorry.
it's what is the gamma function is blah 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 blah. Gamma function is represented by gamma blah 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 blah. It's one commonly used extension of the factorial function to complex numbers. Gamma function is defined for all complex numbers except non-positive integers. For any positive integer, it's the gamma of n equals n minus 1 factorized. It's one of the things that's in a lot of the derivation of this, or at least HF8. To my recollection, I just, and again, just something that I just noticed there, and I'm like,
We're not looking to derive anything on top of the HF8. We're looking to derive the HF8, and what presumptions does that necessitate?
oh no, what I was saying is, if this is a generation for a sphere, what if we assume the volume of the sphere was actually like the volume of the HF8C? So if we were to work backwards and we start noticing things that also pop up, might that lead us to other connections? I should probably actually do the real math to see if it actually is it, rather than being like, oh, it's kind of close. No, I agree.
Well,
We
first
should
of all, we
actually.
don't even know if that thing does what it says it does, right? I mean, it sounds
Yeah,
really good,
I
but we
mean, I
can't
don't
be
know.
sure.
It's just the best model I've seen yet. I see a lot of other people. They seem to be kind of all kind of going in the same direction. It explains a lot.
Well, I mean, does it?
I mean, doesn't it like kind of explain the observed big bangs, why we get the singularities and a lot of these equations. It would kind of explain like the CMB and the at least kind of observed mostly
Hold
flatness of
on.
the
What's the
universe.
explanation of the CMB as you understand it vis-a-vis the HF8?
Basically, as everything's coming out there, all the photons as they're separating and everything, they're going to disperse because the HF8 also generates rotation. It's kind of like spreading a fluid out, and you're kind of
Are
like
you
mixing it up
saying
in a
that the
bottle.
universe is somehow created from the HF8?
Yeah. Or at least that's what we call it, the mind of
So
God. Call it whatever you
okay, yeah.
want. It's
We
it's
don't
the
want to
one.
call it that though, because that's going to cause people to shut down. What we want to do is set it up in a series of steps that makes it easy to follow in bite-sized pieces. So we still need to, zero in even more, right? It's like, why is that a fact? Because that's not self-evident. Why
It's the
must
most
we be
basic
inside it?
balanced construction.
Why do we have to be inside it?
I don't know. Is that where faith comes in?
Well, where else could we be relative to it?
This is why I ask: is it possible to falsify turtles all the way down?
Holy hell!
I don't think I'm going to
Turtles,
include that
man.
in the paper that I'm getting ready to submit, or actually put together. Just one page. Just one page.
Okay.
Just
All right, let's have a talk about this falsifiability thing. How do you understand that condition? Because from what I've read up, what Popper meant was you have to be able to verify, right? Like the purple ponies thing or the teacup on Mars. Like it can't be verified, so for that reason, it can't be falsified. Unfalsifiable literally means unable to be proven false, which is basically, I've said this about a million times, but a weak conditional for true. So how do you understand falsifiable? Like the logical, purely, abstract sense, or the actual proper sense of verifiable?
I thought about phrasing it in a slightly different way, but then I kind of felt like being a dick.
That's unusual.
Well, I am a dick. It's my middle name. I was going back and forth. What would get people attempting to figure this out more? Can we, like, are we doing this together, or has at least
Yes.
the recent past shown that we would prefer to compete rather than work together? I would like us to work together, but if I pitched it the other way, it would create more. I don't know. Maybe that would generate more interest in trying to win.
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Who doesn't want to collaborate? Who wants to compete?
I'm trying to explain via mimetic lattice theory why I think string theory has persisted for so long. It's like, we're almost there. And it's like, I have this other idea. We're almost there. Give us money. And again, a lot of this comes down to kind of like the way we have a lot of these institutions structured and everything. This is a common thing that I've heard from a lot of people that I do believe are very smart. I think we can do better. It's just, if you've got an establishment and the establishment is doing their thing, and if other things they're not familiar with, they seem kind of scary, and they also don't want to have to say something along the lines of, it would make people feel bad, and they would feel like they maybe didn't accomplish as much as they should, where it's like, no, we're always learning things. Even when you learn that something isn't the case, if you get a null actual return, it's like, that tells you something, that tells you it isn't it. It sets up the bounds. And I think we should look at it. Maybe I should phrase it the other way. Maybe you're probably right.
I don't
You were
think people are
saying
going to
about
be
dividing.
convinced. So for
I
you,
got
you just
sidetracked.
basically had, would you agree it was a revelation and then you were fully convinced that we exist in the mind of God after? It was just a matter of understanding what that meant?
Yeah, I mean, whatever that means. I mean, it could it be? I mean, this is the thing. This is why I asked that question, because at that point, it's like, okay, if you're getting some, and again, maybe I'm just assuming too much, but I'm going back to what I think Professor Wolfram had asked a professor that said it was completely crazy when he was like 14 years old. They were describing black holes. He's like, doesn't that kind of sound like an electron and stuff? He's like, no, no, no. This is why I asked the joke occasionally: an electron, a black hole, and the universe walk into the bar. I just like putting it out there. It makes you think. We could be an electron in God's mind. I mean, on relative scales, I mean, it's like
You're jumping to metaphors. You're so excited. You honestly, okay, you got to remember yourself before you realized it. Would this have convinced you, or would you just thought, what a crackpot?
my mind basically just explodes at the point where it's like, God, why couldn't Men in Black just, the galaxies in the bag of marbles? It seems so much simpler. At this, it's like, where does it end? This is why I'm just like, okay, I say that as an established. And again, I thought about ending this proposed paper that I'm thinking about submitting to my alma mater at some point. I'm going to double check with that just because it's like I don't want to rip anybody off or anything. We're going to give full credit to everybody where it's due. Just one page, quick explanation, boom. And I thought about asking this, and it's like, okay, now it's going to turn a potentially serious paper into just kind of a joke. I would like to do that, but I'd also like people to pay attention. I can do that on later things. No. Your rational analysis of okay, here's how we're going to present it to people, and I just actually love that just because it's like, all right, here's a woman, and she's like, well, this is also my religion, and religion can often complicate certain discussions for folks because now you're talking about things of faith, but the sheer fact that you're now like, okay, let's break this down. Which earlier, Sam Harris at one point, he's like, this wonderful thing, I'm pledging to donate 10% of my income towards worthy charities and stuff. I'm like, did did Sam Harris literally just accept a traditionally religious name by other means? We're coming full circle. It's a beautiful thing.
What can I say? It feels good.
It's
Did you happen to see what I was displaying on the screen like, I don't know, 20 minutes ago with the derivation of the blobological analysis there?
Had you sent one to me before? Because I did not see that on this particular stream. The last thing I saw was like the apples and stuff.
Right, and someone in the chat just said, quite pedantically, I might add, even if the math looks wonderful, is mathematically complete, that in no way means it is representative of nature. It's just pretty math. Well,
Right.
I guess if I'm going to grant that, then, if that's true of my thing, then it's true of all math, because I kind of feel like the mushroom apple thing is really true in a way, because there's, a lot of mathematical grounds for it to be true because mathematically it lines up with least action principle. Can
Right.
you
No, well,
say why
you'd
that's
have
true?
observation. You'd have observation from multiple different points. Like you'd have one thing. It's like this really matches up well, but do we have other data points that would support that? And in my opinion, we do. We're going to need to do a lot more work and everything. And I feel like that's a good reason to invest in science to figure this stuff out. Because if you're going to
But the
try to, like, I
person
don't
who
know,
figured it all out did it for free. So doesn't that tell you you need to stop paying people to do this stuff and start just subsidizing the lifestyle of people who will do it for nothing?
well, I mean, you're still paying for science at that point. It's just in via different vectors. I mean, I'm not opposed to really either of them.
Yeah. I mean,
I think a lot of it is what if we actually took science and like we could make it really entertaining, like really entertaining again, and just this is what I hope to do. And again, I actually need to start doing this. And thank you for like saying you would help me with this, like the Eigen Rangers channel, just because it's like, all right, we right now drama is trading at a premium, and it just seems like okay, if we're giving so much attention to this, what if we could actually because there is desire for science, but I think science has kind of been it's been kind of stuffy for a number of years and all that math scares people. So that's why I think we've seen like actually even on YouTube the growth of like a lot of more entertaining channels, whether it's PBS Space Time. Oh my God, PBS, it makes an appearance again. And like other science channels like Kyle Hill and stuff like that. He's kind of a very entertaining guy, but he's explaining things in a way to the best of his knowledge that he knows that are true. And you have a lot of other people, Mathologer and stuff, three blue plus one brown. They're showing that there is interest in this, especially if you can make it more simplistic. And I think this is important because if you've got guys like Professor Leonard Susskind, he came at it from a plumber. So it's like a lot of these things, it's like, all right, he actually has hands-on experience seeing how like fluid dynamics works and everything. Could there be a leak here? What might be affecting these different things? And I think just with proper education and review of material and stuff, I'm pretty sure you want contributing perspectives because if you're trained so much it's like this is the way we do things, we always do things this way, and this is the way things are. You don't want to block out a potential somebody that comes in. It's like, well, what if we did this? Because if you just shun them right away and you don't even try it, I mean, I think that may be one of the things kind of like held us back a bit or depending on who it's coming from as well. It's not that it should matter, but unfortunately that happens.
Well, did you see the Richard Dawkins not interview, debate with Deepak Chopra? It was never
No.
going to be resolved in a mutually satisfactory way. Doovid, you said you have seen it, right? Or parts of
from
it?
years ago.
Yeah, it's like 10 years old at least. I mean,
What? Well, I
go
mean,
ahead.
aren't they arguing over like items of faith? Because if you're going to take something on faith, like I thought that was like the big part of religion. It's up to the individual.
Yeah, I would disagree with the tenant. Like, I don't think there's much demand for science, especially science content. And I mean, there's demand for engineering solutions, and like, not necessarily when people want engineering solutions. People just want their life improved. And if you could offer engineering solutions that improve people's life, they will take them. They will pay for them. And then you have the economic mismatch where it's more money that the current capitalistic system will reward people who come up with engineering solutions, and then you see that people in big tech make most of the money, or the change in the economy, like the learn to code, and who's winning and who's losing, and that people who know science are doing better economically, and then like, so for economic redistribution, that they want to say, oh, if people who know science are doing better, then it's important people learn science. And like, so I was involved in Detroit African Americans, like chess coaching, schools trying to get people college ready, university preparatory math and science, the school is called. And you have a few students, but the people who actually have an interest in math and science are rare. And the info science to so there's the one level, the people who provide the engineering solutions, and then there's the level of the people that fulfill societal functions that require the expertise use of technology, even though they have no idea how the technology was made. And that's also more economic, like to have a like a good profession these days, you need to be computer literate. A lot of times you need to use technology. Even fields like construction or manufacture is dependent on using machines well, or like the automobile, or even like maintaining your modern house and the devices and things like that. So like, trying to make science entertaining is probably relatively self-defeating. It's like, okay, if you were good at science, um if you enjoyed it, but like, it's not entertainment, there's probably really no way to make it entertaining. Even like, I was talking earlier about equations, like finding the shortest distance between 2 points on the surface of a sphere. um, Working out a whole bunch of problems like that is probably more what would benefit Jennifer in advancing her theories, not coming up with a way that would make it more interesting to more viewers. And that's when you have the the tried and true method of the West and the university system, is that you teach undergraduates, and that you have to teach a class, and they have to do these problems, and then you have to grade homework, and you really master the calculations because you've done so many of them, and then you've checked problems, you've taught hundreds of people, you've went over their problems, until like Jennifer, that would just have it mastered and down if she had taught like undergraduate calculus, or these courses for a few years. And that's why the system, if she had stayed in the academic system, she probably would have been forced to do that. Richard Feynman himself taught undergraduate physics. A lot of the greatest math scientists regularly teach undergraduate courses. Just in engineering, you have to be able to correctly solve problems basically 100% of the time. That for it's engineering, the solution you put forward has to be correct, and whatever it takes to be able to do that. So, if you're kind of like streamers, you enjoy talking about this stuff, but you're not really a science. You're not going to be the one who's providing engineering solutions. And, an ego hit, because you don't know engineering or math or science good enough to do it. Um, and so most people wouldn't, like those who can't do teach, those who can't teach preach. So most those who can't do and teach don't admit that they're teaching because they can't do it. But to some extent, there's a truth to that heuristic. So if you want to provide science, entertainment, or like if you want to be a teacher to younger children or something, like you make it fun for younger children, and you say like, okay, the basics of mathematics is important for your life. Any given person will have better outcome, life success, if they know basic algebra. Because there's so many problems that will come up in day-to-day life, like finances or long-term planning, that you'll need to think about things in an algebraic way, and therefore you want to be a great teacher and describe um, semi-complex things. That's why I talk about chunking theory. There's a lot of studies and tests that have shown the difficulty of average people. They even relate to COVID-19 and indoors versus outdoors. That there's been much testing that's demonstrated that most people can't understand exponential growth, like in terms of savings and the interest and the exponential growth on savings. That I think I forget the testing, but it's been tested multiple times.
We throw a lot of different things that people weren't familiar with at them, and we changed our policy on them at some points as well. So that probably didn't help with trust either.
Well, I'm saying that if it's an IQ thing, or if it's an inertia effort. So say at the current state, let's say only like 10-15% of adult US citizens understand exponential growth. And that if you had a whole educational reform, you might pitch it like that 100% of people are, but like in reality, that probably still like only 30% of people would understand exponential growth, even if you did like a whole reworking of the US system and forced every person to go through math classes and paid math teachers like a lot more money and all these various things. It would still probably be diminishing returns, that the majority of adults would just not be able to understand a complicated concept like exponential growth, even though those who can understand it might understand it even before being a teenager, maybe like a 10-12-year-old kid. I was a smart kid. I probably even before being a teenager understood the concept of exponential growth, even though the majority of adults never understand the concept. So if you have some sort of idealistic view, like every person could understand exponential growth, and you design your system,
Just
and
be
then
like,
you don't.
calm down, Gandalf.
Yeah, so I mean, and so your content. So it's saying I want to advance my theory, and you're saying, okay, maybe most people aren't going to be able to understand my theory or could package the theory in different ways that are understandable at different levels. And it's like, okay, Einstein, the theory of relativity versus like the atomic bomb, and someone, like, do people actually, like, people know that there was this engineering thing that worked, or even something like, cars, computers. You don't have to understand how a car works to drive a car. You don't have to understand how your cell phone or computer works to use a cell phone and computer. In fact, most people could use an iPhone, um, even though they have, the vast majority of adults are capable of working an iPhone, even though they have no clue understanding how it works. And then there's a whole science of design ergonomics to making things user friendly to people who don't understand how they work. So
I just want to say something. Orders of magnitude is not an intuitive thing to understand. I certainly don't understand necessarily that
exponential growth,
intuitively.
or you said order of magnitude?
Well, I
It's the
mean,
same
that's just
thing.
compound interest,
Exponential
really.
growth is moving between orders of magnitude simply. I've got a picture there. So here's a question. How many orders of magnitude are in those bubbles, aka bubles? I've got a little image on the screen.
Well, no, what I'm saying is basically I'm more along the lines of, okay, if I don't have these people's gifts, it's like maybe I can popularize it, because like even like the X-Files, there was an observed thing that people were writing about. It's called the Scully effect. Oh my God, you have this FBI agent. She happens to be a woman, and apparently you had a lot of young girls that were like, oh, maybe I want to be an FBI agent. And even on one of the Wolfram streams, someone was like, my niece now wants to build like warp drives or something like that because they see all this stuff. So it's like it's getting people interested in science as well. And to be fair, I think a lot of this different technology and mathematics and stuff, if we also use it for video games, and a lot of the people that may not necessarily be prior interested in math, maybe that would get them interested in math. To be fair, one of my best teachers at calculus was playing World of Warcraft because as a major, I'm like, okay, there's all these different factors depending on the situation. If I want to maximize my damage output, I need to do these different things. Now, I could also sacrifice my damage output to make sure there are enough particular debuffs that people like to skip because they want to see the high numbers for themselves to make sure that Scorch debuff is up on Kel'Thuzad so we can beat vanilla WoW. So there's a number of different factors that are going on here. So it's like I'm analyzing these and trying to setting a goal for myself. If my goal is to maximize damage, I'm going to go about it a particular way. I'm going to skip my Scorch rotation. Whereas if I want to maximize the raid output and our likelihood of defeating the final boss in this iteration of the game, I'm going to go about it from a different parameterization. And I think people know this stuff, but they don't necessarily know that it's just calculus behind it. And I think if we kind of like, I think Minecraft could be like one of the greatest teaching tools for like humanity. You're talking about resource management, allocation. You need to invest these different materials. You need to get up these different levels. You also need to survive. You need to provide yourself shelter because there are things in the night that might kill you. And just I feel if we slightly redesign these things, we could teach a heck of a lot more lessons, and people
But
could
you
actually.
can't teach if you don't know what it is that you're teaching, right?
Oh, well, yeah, you want to know what's going
You could
on.
pop it. That's what I said. Like, I mean, I was a child prodigy. I was recruited to multiple different things, and sometimes it's not even like if it's just a game like chess or something like that. But usually it's emergent, quite young. The talent factor that, and then you'll have the advanced people that will be involved in coaching or training that will recruit quite young, and that really that's even like at Google that they like you ask people their SAT scores, or even to adults, or will base large amounts of things. In a lot of countries, these tests are almost determinative. So you have to differentiate between what I'll call the engineering solutions that is going to be limited to a very few amount of people that are going to be able to do the precursor work necessary to provide solutions to the problems at hand. It's like if you're looking at the current state of math and physics, you're saying what is the current state? What are the solutions that we currently have? What are things that were being pushed forward? And then you want to groom the greater minds into the more important fields. And so if you have a capitalistic system, you could have a money type base that would largely be behind it. And so like Wolfram, he starts out young. He starts out with high school. He's got a camp for high school students, and some say that he knows that at the deeper level of what he's trying to do, it's going to be like one out of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, one out of millions of people that are really going to be able to make any progress. But once these engineering solutions are discovered and offered to the masses at large, then there'll be, so to say, the popularization and the teaching. So it's like, it doesn't matter whether the masses know calculus. No, it doesn't matter. You only need a tiny percent of maybe calculus, something like that. You want like 5-10% of humanity to know basic calculus, and calculus is useful for all sorts of higher level management. That anybody who's going to end up in even middle level management or any chance of higher level management should know calculus, because it's fundamental to so many different things, and like definitely the engineerings and the sciences, versus what it's going to take to push forward the engineering solutions that we really need to drive society forward to teaching society to live according to what you call, like, so to say, the technocracy, because the new technology is formed, and then everybody's going to have a cell phone. The vast majority of people are going to be able to drive, have their own vehicle. Um, like a decent amount of humanity will go on to own their own house or various things. And then what do these people need to know? And what level of knowledge do you need to know to be able to train someone to say, like, what does it take to be a homeowner? What does it take to run your own automobile or have a cell phone versus, the technicians? And, so I would go at it from that angle and say, so you want to find your place. And so, so if you say, memes, you're like, you don't think you're going to be on the forefront, where you're not going to be one of the people who are providing one of these engineering solutions. You're not like, from the great minds that are going to produce a great discovery that provides some sort of new solution that masses of humanity will be able to use. But you might be from the intermediary great minds that will be able to communicate from the great mind to mid-level management and to explain, like, what's the importance of this idea and how it's going to practically change um, people's daily function. And you could put this on a spiritual realm too. Like, now I think, for practicality, we're talking science, and science is more engineering and related to technology. And so it's like, okay, you're a homeowner. There's a lot of things in your house that require maintenance, and without maintenance, the infrastructure gets worn out quicker, and you could have disaster. Like, if you don't change your filters in your furnace might last 2 years. If you change your filters in your furnace monthly, maybe your furnace could last 15 years. Just like, if you have your automobile and you have an oil change every 4,000 miles, and your tune up at your basic maintenance of the automobile, you should be able to get these days like 200,000 miles on a car. But if you don't get regular oil changes or do the regular maintenances, your car probably won't even make it over 100,000 miles, just like your body and health and the various things. And so there might be life extension type things where a great mind might come up with some medical discovery or technology or surgical technique that extends the life of people, and thing that killed people and took 10 years off their life that could add 10 years to the life of countless people or something like that. And so your average doctor, they're not coming up with these great medical solutions that are prolonging life, but they might be able to implement it. And then you have nurses in the various levels to just streaming. So you're just a streamer popularizing and talking about technology. And then also, so we function in a capitalistic world where you have things that need to be sold, and you have logistics and supply chains and suppliers and customers that doesn't matter how you understand it. At the end of the day, you're going to have to formulate it in a way where you have customers, or say, like, the value proposition that I mean, you could be idealistic and say, like, no, any person from any background could be the great mind that's going to come up with the great discovery that changes humanity. But say, no, I mean, usually the signs that a person, even if it's not birth, you're saying, like, no, the only people who are going to make these discoveries that change humanity are going to be people who take very high birth. You say, well, no, not necessarily. People could take low birth and have great minds, but the people who have great minds, it will usually emerge in their youth. Like, by, even if you take low birth
That
and
was
go
a
to
literal
public school.
complete non sequitur. I
No,
thought you were
no,
going to say
no,
something to the effect of they will take birth statistically higher in more rich families, but you're talking about it knowing early in life. I'm going to go, it's true. What is
Well,
the
Well, I
point
say,
of
if you
this?
just
person's
assume that,
It's really hard to
if
chance
you were
of
just going to
detecting
groom the
exceptionality.
people for
Just
leadership
saying.
from high birth, and so I'm saying, but that's obviously not accurate. And that's not the way people do it.
I
Like,
think it's a bit of
Stephen
a
Wolfram doesn't groom people based on high birth. I mean, he might have a few kids that pay their way into his camp or aren't that smart, but because their parents could pay full tuition, he lets them in. But he gives them tests.
he offers a
It,
lot of
it
discounts
emerges
and
quite young
stuff.
that, like, he give them a little bit of a test, and if they're 10 years old and they could solve these problems. So I mean, at a certain point, even in a person's youth, these skills are going to be emergent into an expert in the field. They're going to be able to recognize the signs.
I'm just saying statistically, just regardless of whatever you think, if you have more people, you're statistically going to have more geniuses. But what I'm saying is, it's also probably a factor of, does this person have the opportunity to be like, wow, this person is really good at calculus or solving these problems, or are they barely just trying to scrape by, and that's not on their main hierarchy of working at things.
Well, it's saying that, okay, that even to some extent, let's say that there's reasonably ways to see emergent talent in youth, that people have propensity to have skills for certain areas. And so, if you're an adult or expert in the field and you're trying to recruit those people, so you could just, like if you're MIT, you say there's the people who want to get into MIT, the people who are applying, and that could be for whatever reasons, could be because their parents or they want to make money, or it could be because they have a propensity to to be really good at understanding and solving certain type problems, and they want to nurture that potential. And then you could have people who have that potential and don't really care about it. They don't plan on doing something, like the Doovid's trying to enlighten people on the hard problem of consciousness. Like, so first recruit the great minds, recognize the great minds, and then entice the great minds to be interested in using their great minds towards these difficult problems that in all likelihood it'll only be these great minds that are going to be able to make advancement. And then so be the interest in the field that like, okay, you could be talking about the hard problem of consciousness, and the direction of the research, and it's extremely complicated unless someone masters multiple extremely complex subsets of skills. They really have little chance of making advancement in the field. And someone has to be able to understand, chemistry, physics, mathematics, psychology, linguistics, some of the more complicated fields that, testing will show, like, if we put IQ or scores, and then to understand multiple of these fields well to make advancements in the hard problem of consciousness, versus if the people are just interested in it. And so you could look, okay, me and Jennifer stream about the hard problem of consciousness. There's a lot of people interested, and we talk about it, and you could better humanity and inform people about things that make their life better and society better, and get people involved in the self-improvement process, versus saying, like, what exactly is orchestrated objective orchestrated reduction, what is quantum mind. And you're saying, like, you pretty much have to understand quantum mechanics to understand quantum mind. And most people, no matter how hard they try, are really not going to understand quantum mechanics that well, because it requires some of the most complicated science and mathematics that exist. Although you'd understand it a little bit to be interested and maybe be useful, but I mean to actually make advancements on the field. So if you're like Hamarov, that actually has an advanced institute of studies and has already got your building and accreditation and funding, and maybe you have a series of applicants that are applying, and maybe like Wolfram, I don't know if Hammerom has like a summer school for high school students, or a summer camp for junior high school students, or any of these various things to nurture the great minds, and say, like, no, like, if you really want to be interested in this, I'm starting with people in junior high school, and I'm already telling them the type curriculum that they need to look towards into high school, the type universities they need to apply to, the type things they need to study in university, that they're going to be able to really make advancements in these fields. And then if you're saying, like, no, I mean, these things are extremely complicated and you need like a 1 out of 1 million mind just to understand the prerequisite knowledge to push it forward. And so saying, like, saying this, like Wolfram, like, they're recruiting these people in like young, and so I mean, you have to look at it like, I mean, you don't have to look at it that way, but I think it's a pretty factual understanding of how these processes work. And so you say, like, okay, like me and Jennifer are adults, we don't have an academic position, but we still want to make advancements. Like, I still want to come up with this great discovery that's going to push forward progress. But what's the likelihood a lay person not at an institute, or without a position in research, is going to do that? Close to zero. but still might dedicate the work and research versus popularizing the subjects or explaining these complicated ideas at a certain level so that they're understandable to the masses. And that's why I tried to teach Jennifer chunking theory and stress the value proposition to say what educational, when people come on Week in Review, I usually ask them about their educational background, what type of mathematics, science do they have, what type of books do they read, what do they think about in their spare time, to the levels of how well are they going to understand these concepts. Are we going to be able to take out a whiteboard and write purely symbolic formulas, or are we going to be using parables and analogies? And so, like, no, I mean, you could explain the most complicated ideas to young children. Like, I heard about Einstein as a young kid. Your average person, nuclear energy, could visit a nuclear energy plant, and so you could turn that matter into energy or something. Like, you could understand that on a simple level, and that from a master teacher, that probably comes from understanding chunking theory. And like as a chess coach, like I was working under one of the best well-known chess coaches in the world, Sunil Rodamantri, father-in-law of Hikaru Nakamura, one of the best players in the world. And his book is called Demystifying Chess, and it's kind of based on chunking, where he breaks it into concrete units that are explainable, and anybody on a given level, that if they understand these discrete units of information and put them together, will improve their chess play. And then skill levels where here's 10, 15 discrete units of information, and if you understand this, you have a numeric like rating level strength. And to coaching a person, and that's why I said, like, someone like Wolfram, who has I think he has a summer camp for like middle school kids or something like that. And so he's going to take middle school students and say, like, yeah, you really like this stuff, let me tell you the type stuff that you should study in high school, and then so that you could get into a school like MIT. And then when you get into MIT, what type of degree you might want to go for, the type of books and things you should think about, the people that have propensity to code, the computer languages and programs that they should know how to use. And I've been trying to move Week in Review even to smaller numbers to be more
How
computative.
can it get any smaller without there being negative amounts of viewers? Victoria asks, she's interested in said subjects, doesn't claim to have or believe to have any impact on these fields, but then says, so what?
Well, I mean, you have impact
Well,
on a
that's the
field
thing. We're
that
spreading the
you
memes
could
around,
use.
Doovid. That's the thing. It's just
You could use the solution.
wait.
You just,
Well, I think you're looking
I
at
mean,
the
there's
actual.
early adapters. You could
Right.
be an early adapter of an idea. Like, so most
I think you mean
people,
adopter.
No, we're talking about popularizing via the adaption, which will then lead to early adopters.
Early adapter
like
would mean you were taking
orchestrated
the idea and
objective
adapting it, i.e.
reduction.
changing it, which would imply
Do
you
you really
understood it, which
understand?
is not the case.
Well, I mean, memes. Do you really understand orchestrated objective reduction?
No, I don't even know what that means at all. I'm
I mean,
interested in
the
learning.
Penrose, the OKR theory of quantum mind.
No, are you talking about like stuff from the Emperor's New Mind? Like, I haven't read it.
Oh, but you at least know that Penrose wrote the Emperor's New Mind.
I've heard some discussions on what he views as consciousness. He kind of goes into microtubules, which sound like a pretty good thing. And if you're talking about resonant structures and oscillation, yada yada yada.
Yes, I mean, you know more than the average person. You've at least heard of it. So I'm saying, let's say Victoria didn't even take pre-calculus. Like, she
Well,
just
my thing is, I wouldn't have learned if I didn't hear other people talking about it. See, I'm also very heavily auditory as well, and I also have the benefit of being able to listen to long-form discussions and stuff. And if there happens to be a very particular thing with a diagram or a particular equation, I'll usually maybe write down a quick note or something and then be able to go back. This is very often while I'll comment on different streams. So I'll be able to go back to that video, click on that link and see what was being discussed, because I'm kind of like actually trying to keep form of almost chunking, because I don't know, I probably got this from you then. I think I've been doing it before, but the way you describe chunking theory, it's like, okay, I have a hint of an idea. I don't necessarily know exactly what's going on, but I want at least a reference point. So I knew that there was something here that could spur my memory to recall that particular chunk or segment. This is the thing. I'm not really disagreeing with you. I just think we kind of get off on a tangent about like being able to popularize science and stuff.
Well, so I
It's
said that
also fun.
anybody at any level could be involved in the, like as an
Right.
early adapter. That like
Well, look
if
at
you were a
crypto.
computer geek, when I was in high school, there were guys that had like circuit boards and were trying to put together
Right.
their own computers, and then there were people who were getting their first home computers. They were just coming out, and whatever the technology, like the iPhone, or so if it comes down to technological gadgets and being an early adapter, or just being interested in ideas, and you might understand, like, so if you have no background in science, really are completely lost at like what is even quantum mechanics, um so you're going to say, like, what do I care about quantum mind, like, what practical purpose? I mean, it could be at some point quantum mind doesn't make, like, it's not going to make that much of a difference. And if you have no background in mathematics or science, even my mother, I mean, wonderful woman, one of the most, became one of the more successful lawyers in the state of Michigan, represented big companies, never took, like, hardly even knows algebra, her level of science, that I don't think I could really explain to her something that she would understand about quantum mind. Like, she doesn't have the background in science, and there's not a practical example or like device or technology that we would even be able to put in front of her. Like, I
We'll
still
just
set.
say, "Hey, mom, on the days where you don't feel like yourself, are those a good day or a bad day?" And she'll say, "A bad day," and you'll say, "Why?" And you'll say, "Quantum mind." And then you'll just walk out. No
Well, I mean, I
further
still
explanation.
set, I still set the, my when daylight savings time, I still have to go in my mom's car and change her clock for her. And like, I don't mind, but, so I mean, if Victoria's like my mom or something like that, like, just like don't have any background or science, doesn't, maybe like, I mean, numbers to a certain, it's like accounting, dealing with
Well,
money.
it's almost how much somebody cares. How much computation do you think your mom really cares about changing the clock, especially if you're willing to do it for her? 'Cause a lot of times, or by the principle of least action, it's much easier to have Doovid change it rather than to spend the time to bring out a manual to try to search something online, even if she's really a big online person. So, I mean, you can kind of just go at it that way. I know I very often wait until it's like, crap, I should have done this a long time ago. I'm
Which,
tempting to ship.
Victoria's correcting. She says she had dual BS degrees and was raised with tech, computers, radio, electronic, and robotics. Well, good for you. So you probably can understand the basics of quantum mind. Like, so good for you.
I think it's relatability. This is the big thing, like, because I spent about a decade in corporate sales, and you can talk about, oh, the R factor, whatever, of this window, the different panes, it has argon gas and everything. You can talk about all those things, but the average person, they're not really going to get it relatable. It's like, okay, you can take a potato off the grill. If it's wrapped in tinfoil, you're a lot less likely to hurt it because it's reflecting a lot of that inward heat in. It'll still be hot for at least a little bit. This is the thing, the ability to
Well, I mentioned a
analogize,
homeowner.
use
There's okay,
metaphor.
like, so
Okay, yeah.
I mean, my mother's married to my father, who understands science quite well, as a master's degree in mathematics. He was a medical doctor. But saying, okay, you could become successful enough to be a homeowner, um, without having much background in math and science, and then maybe you're going to go to expertise like medical advice, but saying, like, no, I mean, you're not going to be selling windows or an R factor to your average person. Like, you'd have to be a homeowner, or property owner that would even be considering such a thing, and you would expect a higher level of cognitive ability, or at least the administration of expertise to to know what is an R factor, why should I care about the windows, or your return on investment, time value of money type things. Like I said, exponential growth is beyond the understanding of most people. So something like the R factor, windows,
I don't
energy
think so. If you
efficiency,
parameterize it well, sorry.
it's related to the time factor of money, is based on exponential growth or something. So if you're looking at R factor in terms of should you get your windows, how long will it take for the investment based on time factor of money is the reverse formula of interest and exponential growth. But I said, like, if you're going house to house trying to sell windows in the R factor, so your average homeowner, I would guess even like probably here your average homeowner would be able to understand something like an R factor. Maybe like 1 out of 3, 1 out of 2 people would be able to understand R factor. But yeah, it could be 50% of people in my neighborhood. Like it is the R factor would be too much for them.
What I'm saying is you would explain to them in a way that's logical that your average Sally, Dick, or Jane can understand. Because to be fair, it's like again a lot of this I
Well, I
got
said
from
that's
video
what
games.
my point was. Your average Sally, Dick, or Jane doesn't have to understand the R factor. Only homeowners do.
Well, I mean, it would
I mean, if
also
you're a
help because
renter and
well,
if
if your
you're a renter
landlord
and you're
asks you
paying
to
heat,
keep the temperature down, I mean, now you kind of understand maybe why that might be. What I'm saying is, if we have better understanding, our observation about what's actually going on in the world and the universe around us, if it makes more sense, then we don't have to fill in as many gaps, and maybe we get more trusting of what's going on rather than just evolving to, oh my
Isn't
God, it was a
that
gremlin.
predicated on some kind of teleological argument, though?
I'm just like I
How do
wanted
you
to talk
ground
about
that to the
spheres.
exclusion of all others?
well, I'm saying if you want
I
to
learned a lot of things.
keep your mind sharp for calculative abilities, so I'm saying right now you don't do anything in your adult life that requires um, you to be able to make these accurate calculations. Although maybe in your younger years you had thought that you might end up in a field where you do have to make these calculations regularly. So like
Not since halfway through the 6th grade. I never learned how to cross multiply fractions, and then the system just kind of moved me along. Our teacher said we didn't need to learn this today, and then we got to pre-algebra. It's like, now that you know how to cross multiply fractions, here are letters. It's just
I mean, you're selling
throw me off.
Windows or something like that, and the R factor or something. No, I mean, or if you're doing return on investment and energy efficient saving,
Well,
where
people need
you
to have an
regularly
interest. If they don't
regularly
have an
are.
interest, why they just get bored? That's what I'm kind of saying. Like Doovid might enjoy all these
Well,
different
it
things
doesn't
about
matter that you
looking at
get
different
bored. It's saying that
parameters of chess.
when you're selling something, and you work out with your customer the return on investment for something like that. Like it's likely if you were a good salesman or a successful, that you would be able to quickly in a matter of 10 minutes with a serious customer work out the time value return on investment for the energy savings of upgrading their windows.
Right.
And so, I
No,
mean,
no, it,
is that
it's
something that you did?
it's high
Like
school
if
math.
you
Yeah,
sold
no, we
windows, you
do
came
that.
in
Yeah.
and then
Oh,
you were able
absolutely.
to sit down with a paper and work out and saying, this is how much energy you save and this is how long it would take, so to say, to get the return on your investment in energy savings.
Right. Well, you would do an estimate of stuff because unless you had all the parameters and everything, but you'd be like, okay, right now, because you usually do a little thing, you'd have like you do like the heat gun on there. You check whatever the outside temperature is. If it's like winter, right, it is now. If you have basically just standard air gap windows, it's probably gonna be pretty cold. If you have a high quality window, guess what? It's probably gonna be a lot better. So you figure out, okay, maybe it's a 10, 15, even at a 10% savings, you do the calculations of spending X number of dollars a month. And again, it always depends on the situation. If you have a lot of windows, but then again, that's going to be a higher investment cost as well. But there are some people that literally spend thousands of dollars a month in heating. So maybe that makes a lot more sense, especially if you're going to plan on spending a number of different years in the home. So, and again, it all depends on these different variables as
You
oftentimes
could have
how
a
much you
closer
scare
also. So
people.
I mean, like in my
You also
neighborhood,
don't
you
want
have
them to
people that
cancel.
just bang on your windows. Like, oh, I'm in your neighborhood doing windows, and like those guys probably couldn't make the calculation. But if you were interested, they could probably. I mean, they might have
There's
they
cross
might have
training and
like an
stuff. It
index
depends.
card or something that they could look at that would give some sort of heuristic for them to give an estimate. Or if they're interested, they might be able to call someone at the home office. Like I never found employment as a cost estimator because really they just use sales, or they want to send you out for sales, the cost estimator, because you got to give free estimates, and it's really kind of sales. And I had roommates in New York that were mortgage brokers, and a lot of it's sales, and then you have the closer. So you hook them in, or you get a whale, and then then once they're interested, you have him talk to the math guy in the office who closes the deal and and crunches the numbers. But the person on this who gets the sales, he might be going to nightclubs and wooing and clients, or using more generic social sales techniques to get the customers. And then when it comes to closing the deal, he's got his buddy in the office that crunches the numbers. But I mean, eventually, before the customer signs, closes the deal, he's going to speak to the math guy and get the numbers, even with the windows. That if the guy just bounces on your window and tells you some basic things about, oh, you're going to save money in the long time, and maybe even has like a card in their pocket that gives him some estimate, that if you're interested, you're probably going to speak to his boss or some of the office, and they're going to, before you actually sign a contract, and give a check that's going to give you more accurate numbers. And I trained in engineering, like for multiple fields, like here in Metro Detroit, they had whole programs to retrofit buildings, and like light bulbs were a very big thing, incandescent light bulbs, and the upgrade in light bulb technology, and they computer software and all these various things. But most of it's sales. At the end of the day, they have someone largely in sales, and the number cruncher usually isn't the best guy at sales. So they're just going to have like a sales force of like 10 guys that don't understand the numbers that well, and then one number cruncher in the office that that those guys talk to, because most of sales, most people say no. So but
it's a different talent stack.
But it's going to be similar for science education, that most people don't need to know how to code. They don't need to know advanced mathematics, let alone the stuff to actually provide engineering solutions.
Right.
So
But
like
if we could have more smart people
Doovid
that
is
are
interested
interested
in the
in that,
highest
yeah.
level of the actual engineering solutions to the most complicated problems that exist. And so that's a little bit beyond myself. I'm not going to be providing those engineering solutions to the most complicated, but I might be at the intellectual level where I could communicate and understand the person that could provide that. And
You might be the one that gets them interested. It might have been that conversation with a
well, I'm
Rabbi
saying if I
Doovid.
recruit
Yeah.
someone young, but I'm saying that no, the person that is in the R&D facility, or that the theoretical scientist that's thinking about these things, and then they might speak to someone like me who would scientifically grasp what they're saying, and then maybe I would help explain that to business people or lower level technicians, and then even the level of streaming. I've been reading these books. Moshe Feinstein, one of the most famous rabbis, and he used to give weekly classes in synagogue. And one of the notes of like all these big rabbis is that all rabbis give class on the weekly Torah portion, Bible reading. But it'd be interesting to extreme scholars, to little kids alike, that the big rabbis in town, he's in synagogue, and the whole community comes to see, from the biggest scholars to the little kids, and he gives a class, and it's equally engaging to the greatest minds, to just little kids. And so for like streaming or talking to the masses, that's the art to trying to figure, to have like we said many times, like experts are rare. So if you're just among experts, you're going to be speaking mostly in logos. It might be purely symbolic logic and stuff that non-experts.
It's mostly going to be jargon and things that are completely uncontroversial, and like a donut flavors.
Technical language that would be unintelligible to basically anybody but an expert, and maybe like an adapt to like a trainee, like a higher level college student, but like, oh, I understand a lot of the words or what they're talking about. But even that, like a symposium of experts is unintelligible to the layman.
Well, if it's a shitty symposium.
I just think we should help inspire more smart people to be working on these difficult problems. I think the world will be a better place.
Well, I mean, make it a better place.
Well, I'm just saying, a stream like this we can essentially do for free if we get good ideas out there.
If you're talking spiritual enlightenment, it's different than technological solutions. So it's like you're laying out, like I'm a civil engineer, And like we talked about, like your area, Boston, like Charles Moskowitz also there, but the problem with American infrastructure, it's past the most American, the majority of American infrastructure is past its useful lifespan. And so something like that, where the great minds trying to figure out what are we going to do with the fact that our infrastructure is crumbling, and or to engineering solutions versus some sort of how people are going to get along, teach like multiculturalism and globalism, or any of these challenges that face us all equally on society, of how humans get along together versus technological solutions that maybe uh, the way solutions like his policy are designed is they're usually top down. There might be financial incentives to upgrading the infrastructure. There might be penalties. There might be obligations. Phase-ins. Things like electric automobiles or wireless automobiles. I did the stream of presumably by 2050 we are going to have majority autonomous vehicles, but it's going to be a phase in over the next 30 years, just like electrical vehicles have been being phased in. And slowly you might see more charging stations or things like that, because it's a general phase in process. And then what level do the masses need to know as things are phased in? And so the younger generation in schools are going to be trained in that they were trained for this phase in. And then the older generation at some point, the past
Transition period. Yeah, we have that for
the
a
past
lot of
solution is just
industries.
no
Yeah,
longer going to be available, and then it could even be forbidden, or there could be a penalty, like diesel cars or something like that. Like there's eventually,
tax policy.
like you can't get a diesel car, and if you're still trying to drive a diesel car, you're gonna get a ticket or get a penalty.
So we're not
So
talking about spheres anymore.
yeah, I mean, everything's interesting to talk about. And we got Ralph in
Right.
the chat. Um,
All right,
yeah,
I'm gonna run. I gotta have dinner and stuff like that. But hey, thank you for having me on. I'll talk to you all guys later, and have a happy New Year and Merry Christmas if
You too. Looking
something
forward to
you
the
all do.
next time. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, and looking
Yep,
forward
peace
to
out.
yeah.
YouTube blessings. Yeah, Ralph, you had mentioned that maybe we were going to stream last week. Um, and he also mentioned that he, like, one of his students or buddies is studying under uh, Roger Penrose, Sir Roger Penrose, and that you're trying to book an interview with Roger Penrose. So that would definitely be cool. If you cut me in on that or something, would definitely take you up on that. Or if you just want to stream this week on consciousness, heart problem consciousness. Like Ralph's got a good mind. He's got mathematical scientific training, and understands the basic precursors of complicated theories like objective orchestrated reduction. If he even has students that are that know Roger Penrose, or even to possibly book and have conversation with Roger Penrose, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, guess it's not outside the realm of possibility. He did participate in the Science of Consciousness conference.
Well, he's been participating in that for decades, and I mean Penrose is. No, I'm saying that him appearing on Ralph's channel, I mean, it would be. I mean, it's possible that he's the type guy who would say yes. So if Ralph has like a student that's in one of his, or friends that's in one of his programs, and ask them like, this guy's got a podcast, would he be on it? It's remotely possible that he would do it. I see Penrose occasionally. I share those links that he's on smaller broadcasts. So I mean, it's possible that he would do that. Did you want to come on, Ralph? Did you want to wrap up, or do you want to see if Ralph wants to come on a few
I'm fine
minutes?
if he wants to come on. That's
I'll send you the link on Twitter. And I think at least we could wrap up. And yeah, like I don't think we're like week in review is week in review, and like know your genre, and you want to make more popular program, like politically provoked is live now. has over 100 viewers. So I sent Ralph the link on Twitter, and
yeah, if
so
anyone else wants to come on, you can send Doovid a message on Twitter at RebDoovid, and with 4 O's, and we'll send you the link if you're a real person, for sure, which we'll check this time.
So anything else you want to talk about?
I had 2 debate topics that seemed
So it looks
possibly
like
interesting.
Ralph is laying down ours. So no big deal. We could, if you do want to stream this week, I guess on your channel about consciousness, you could reach out. Maybe even Jennifer would join. So no problem. Have a good night. If you're there in Europe right now, it's in the mornings. No reason for you to get up just to schmooze. So what you say, your 2 debate topics?
Yeah. Whether consciousness goes beyond physics, like, is it possible to describe consciousness with the laws of physics? Because people make this assertion, but then they can't back it up because there's absolutely no physical law parameterization of the laws of consciousness. So it's essentially a faith statement. Very strange, but an probably interesting debate just because it's vague enough.
Well, I mean, that you'd have a T-Jump or someone like that. And that was kind of like the first debate I had with Ben Watkins on whether consciousness could arise from the material. It was my first debate with Ben Watkins. And me and JF had that within evolution. Our debate, 3-hour debate on evolution. The first hour or so was on whether consciousness could arise from the material. But I mean, Ben Watkins was a philosopher, and JF is a biologist. So if you want to like physics, like in terms of like information theory, or like Penrose, that or something like that from even information theory, that like an AI, something that you're talking like someone like Ralph, who's more into computer science. You wouldn't be talking like JF from biology, but from a computer science perspective of whether information theory could produce consciousness.
Yeah. Well, yours was almost not a debate, it was almost a discussion, and I would love to just see it progress a little bit faster, because a lot of the times it's just not going anywhere. It's not getting any more specific, and there needs to be more pointed questions asked and speculation, meaningful speculation. Because there was a comment that was made by Half Galician about your style, and I'm just going to quickly pull it up here. It's in my paper notes, so it's a little bit harder to... It was something to the effect of, they really enjoy your explanations, but it seems like aimless and uncentered. It's just basically a recitation of facts. And I guess the same criticism could be made about my presentations, but how do you respond to criticism like that?
Well, and especially if you're among experts, that's all it's going to be, is a recitation of facts. Like, I mean, if you're in a debate and you like your ethos, logos, pathos.
I don't know how you can say that, because when I was talking to experts in my field, it was not just a presentation of facts. There was tons of argumentation that I was making.
Arguing, like, because they
telling
need to be
them how it is
or something.
Saying, here's how it is. Write it down. Because I'm at the front of the room and I'm telling you how it is. There was a fair bit of that.
You need to persuade them and saying that they were there to learn.
I don't really need to persuade them, do I?
I can presented just say the facts. I mean, because you had a position of expertise. They were there paying or being paid to learn something, and you were accepted as the person who had the knowledge to teach it. So they just accepted you as the teacher and wrote down your explanations. So it wasn't there was no persuasion involved.
Yeah, there has been at moments of persuasion for sure. When you're creating novel implementations of technology, there are, yes, you have to persuade people.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like I'm saying, like when you try to make
I wouldn't say most of my job was persuasion, but a fair bit of it involved persuasion.
Okay, it depends on the circumstance. So I'm saying in optimal circumstance, you don't need uh persuasion. Like, I mean, so
Well,
if you're
sure.
if
Character
you're
reference, because you're ultimately persuading the court that you're authoritative to speak on the evidence and the capacity that you're claiming. So it's all
yeah, it's like
about an
if you need
accurate
to
representation
establish
of
yourself,
expertise.
I mean, saying if you're there as the experts and the people want to learn, then you don't need uh persuasion. You just present facts. Like in a good university class, a good school.
You're acting as though facts are uncontroversial all the time, which is not a fact, if there
Well, I
is
mean, it
such a
could be
thing.
controversial, but I'm saying you could have questionings and you could have people who don't understand or people who will argue trains of logic. But I'm saying that, like, if it's a typical classroom, like, like public school or even university, it's like, oh man, why do I have to learn this? Why is this person at the head of the classroom? And, so there's, they just told me this stuff is important, but I don't think it's important. Or like, I just want to get ahead in life. And they told me that I need to take this class and, so that I could, move on to the next stage in my life, as opposed to if you have eager students that are interested in the topic at hand and have recognized this person as the person to that they want to has the expertise to give over the knowledge. You might have a give and take. I mean, you could call something certain level of persuasion if it's logos or like a working through of the logic. But like, no, I mean, I would say um I mean, like here in Michigan you have engineer training and they have seminars and they're extremely expensive, and they cost like really thousands of dollars for like a day seminar, and it doesn't really involve persuasion. It's pure training, and there might be some questions, and it's usually technology or skill related. So I mean, if you were doing something like that where people were at a day seminar and they're expected to walk away with a skill afterwards, and they know very clearly what it is, the skill that you're supposed to be teaching them, what they want to know, what their current state of knowledge and what their desired state of knowledge is. um, yeah, I don't see where persuasion falls into that. You have to persuade
You
people if
don't
they
think
don't.
if you're an expert in court, coming in to be
I'm not
qualified to speak
talking
on
about
evidence?
court. Why do you keep on
Okay,
bringing up court?
okay.
I just gave you the example, like I was saying, where
I
people
thought you
pay
were trying to generalize.
$1,000 a day for an engineer seminar, and they want them to teach them a skill that afterwards they're going to get
Sure,
to
yeah.
a
Then there's
higher
no
placement
persuasion.
in their
Yeah, yeah,
job.
yeah.
There's
There's no.
absolutely zero
Okay, why are we even
persuasion in that.
arguing about this?
You're the one arguing about it.
Okay,
I mean, you were saying you
my bad.
testified in court, and therefore you were persuading people, so you weren't giving expert training. You're saying you were giving expert training.
Well, both, I guess. Yeah, I didn't mean to like make an argument where there was no argument. I just thought you were making a generalization where it just seemed like it's possible to present facts without expertise, and I'm saying
Without
that's
persuasion.
not without
So they,
you have to persuade people of expertise, I guess is what I'm saying.
well, I'm saying expertise is established, then there's no persuasion. And saying in a lot of these scenarios, especially engineering, um, it's very easy to establish um, expertise. Like for example, ComSoil. Like I went to many training seminars on ComSoil. ComSoil is extremely expensive software. It costs like $10,000 for their software, and occasionally their experts come and they train you how to use the software. So occasionally they have sales and they'll try to persuade you why it's valuable. But when they actually have their seminars where they're teaching you, there's no persuasion. There's just a bunch of people with computers trying to figure out how to use it, and the person at the front explaining how to use it. And if the person at the front has lapses in their knowledge, and but still they're the best hope you have to working the software, or if it's like a skill like cost estimating, like blueprint reading, like all type things that there's seminars all the time, and you go to the class like, I don't know, you either know how to read blueprints or you don't. And if for whatever reason for your certification, even though you already know how to read them, you have to take the class. So you might be snickering that you're sitting in their class when you already know the information, but like, no, you want to get your certification. You're in the class, usually you're paying for it, and you know that the advancement in your career is dependent on mastery of this skill, there's absolutely no persuasion, and you could have high levels of basically just giving over facts, and it's almost purely technical. I mean, that maybe if people use humor a tiny bit, people might toss in a joke or something, or a sports reference, or a politics reference. But it's basically, um, I've sat in hundreds of hours of this stuff, like from, just listening to purely technical explanations with nothing else than just technical explanations.
Wow. I cannot say that I have done that.
Okay, well, I mean, you only have a bachelor's degree. You only did certain levels of work, but I mean, presumably, you learned how to use like some sort of software, or
I
you know, like.
changed majors twice to get out of having to learn stuff I didn't really want to learn, so
But I
probably
mean, you got a
not.
job and you work with certain advanced software, right?
Um, it depends what you mean by worked with. I didn't really
You operated
nothing.
advanced sound software,
Yes, that's true.
and so there wasn't just purely they trained you on the software, and it was just someone lecturing purely technical, like this does that for hours until you learned how to use the software.
There were some courses like that. Yes.
I day traded, like I taught people how to day trade, and it was just a screen of numbers and charts, and for hours I could sit there and talk just numbers and chart. This means this means that, uh, and people either got it or they didn't. And if it professionally, like it was money, like the company, or my friend from Israel, he was either going to put money in front of the people or not, and if he thought they would get it, maybe he would have someone like me explain it to him, but that was it. So like if we're looking at a stock like a level 2 charting, technical analysis or something like Forex Shark or something like that, like Forex Shark, I was almost going to stream with him. It was purely technical, just looking at charts, the meaning of charts, uh, doing these calculations of in and outs, stability points, and it was just purely technical. There's no persuading that, if you want to talk like Bollinger Bands or the various techniques that he was using, maybe a little bit of persuasion. Um, the stream I did with him on his channel that got taken down
Can that
eventually.
even be said to be a science?
Well, I mean, but I mean, chart reading and like Bollinger Bands or these things, they're purely mathematical. That I mean, you just argue like, should I really buy at this point? That I mean, if you're looking to make to trade forex or any equity, and you want to calculate your in and out points, and there's these various techniques that you could use to calculate these uh, in and out points. So if you're trading someone else's money or you're working for a trading firm, and it's purely technical, someone's going to sit there, is going to explain to you, this is how you make the calculation, and you have to be pretty smart to get one of these jobs. So I mean, it's unlikely you're going to get one of these jobs if you're not capable of being explained something like this and picking it up. So I mean, some guy like Michael Forex Shark would sit there with you, tens of minutes, a few hours, and explain it to you. And then maybe if you work in the same office, you'd be able to ask him questions for a few weeks till you get it. But I mean, it would just be purely technical. It would just explain things, and you had to get it. Take a few notes, ask a few questions until you could do it. And so, if it was your own money, and you want to know his technique, so I mean, one thing would be, why would he be just giving you his advice for your own money? I mean, he could have his various reasons why he's doing it, persuading you, like why you should use his technique for picking price points. So maybe like a persuasion. So I mean, usually in employment, there's no persuasion, because you're either there for your job, where you've been went through an interview selection process, and then this is your employment, this is your skill, you have a training seminar, and then you're getting to work, and you want to get through the training seminar as quickly as possible to get to work. And usually the training seminar these days is all technical, based on understanding some sort of software. Like in olden days, it might have been like pen and paper. So it's like, I mean, you like takeoffs or blueprints for cost estimating. You know what those are? Takeoffs from blueprints.
Not specifically, no. Sorry, I don't have any initiation into actual engineering.
So you have like a blueprint, and it has dimensions, and then you want to calculate how much material you need to order. So in the olden days, you might have taken out like one of these special engineering rulers, because that are, like had different dimensions, that you would have like 3/16 or something, whatever dimensions of what, like um, if 3/16 of an inch on the engineering drawing is 10 feet or something like that, or however on your drawing, that you would take out your ruler, you would make the measurement, you would add them up, and then you would make a chart on how much material has to be ordered. So I mean, it's probably like, Jennifer's a smart woman. I could probably explain to her within probably 5 minutes even how to do a takeoff on a blueprint. I mean, it doesn't sound that complicated, right? You have dimensions, and then you just need to convert the dimensions to, you need to take out a ruler, measure the dimensions, then convert it to the actual footage, and put that into a chart for the amount of building materials. Right? And it sounds, you're a smart woman, you could probably do that and figure it out. Like if you, for a reason, like you wanted to work for, some construction company doing cost estimating and takeoffs, that's something pretty simple, right?
I suppose it depends on the project and how long you're looking to.
I mean, a
have to
blueprint.
pay
That
for.
they're saying that if you're a contractor and you constantly get blueprints, and you need to, I mean, this is just a profession I had, and you need to get the blueprint, and then you need to calculate how much material needs to be ordered. That so it's saying like, okay, here's our contractor company, and we get 50 blueprints in a day, and you're going to get the blueprint, and you're going to make the calculation, you're going to put it into a Excel table, and um, give me the chart so I could calculate the material cost, or even you do the material cost. So it's something that, like, yeah, probably within a few minutes I could have you at work. That, like, say, like if you came, like you needed work, and you're going to be hired at Doovid's tile and carpet and wallpaper or whatever company, whatever, and then we get the jobs and the blueprint. I give you the blueprint, and then I want you to come back with a file that has how much material needs to be ordered, and based on square footages. That like, I could probably teach you how to do that in not too long. Like minutes, hours. You might have a few questions. You might get a few things wrong for a few days, but after a few days, you're going to be able to do the job. You're going to get the blueprints, and you're going to give me the charts with the square footage of the various building materials that need to be ordered. And so and then also there might be like Excel, so you might need a little bit of a training how to make the proper Excel file if you're using like QuickBooks or one of these programs where where your boss would just explain to you how to do it, and it would involve zero persuasion. It would just be, this is how you do it, and you would listen. You might ask a few questions, and then you would be able to produce the result. Which, to some extent, that's how science works. Like generic science.
That's technology. It's replicable. That's the key thing with technology, is that you can replicate the results. Science is a method for deriving new theories. Like it's almost never the case that we're doing science, but if we want to become philosophers, then we have to learn what the scientific method is, because philosophy is even, in a sense, more challenging than science is more general.
Yeah, I mean, so we have a show, we like talking about philosophy and argue or whatever, but it's saying like in an employment technical field, it's usually something technical that needs to be done, and it's usually repetitive, and usually it's taught by an expert to inductees, and then the people have picked up the skill, and then they replicate and do the skill again and again, and then maybe at some future point they'll learn a new skill. And that's generally how life works in employment. And so in fields like that, there's no real persuasion. Sometimes the people will use a tiny bit of humor or throw in something about sports or politics, but sometimes not. Sometimes it's just pure technical instruction. um Actually, I have a friend on Facebook. He said, thank God you'd be doing good employment wise. I was in Israel with them, and we used to argue about evolution. We were in the same class, the AMA. I was talking about this Rabbi David Gottlieb, who was this rabbi. Was a professor of philosophical logic or something at John Hopkins in Baltimore, and he became a rabbi, and he was in Jerusalem, and he argued against evolution, these various topics, and we both had him, and so my friend, we spent tens of hours arguing about evolution. He still believes in evolution, and like whether the Torah or Judaism was logically true or something like that. But he went on to, he works for Microsoft, and he's quite successful. And but I say most employment, um and it might be a lot of sales. Like you go to a company, you assess their technological needs, what software they need, um, then you offer a package, you sell it to them, and then you help them set it up. And these days most technology comes with a package deal. Like so if it's like IT professional, if it could be like a medical office, any sort of employment, a clothing store, um, and you assess their technology needs. You tell them what type of computers they need. Maybe you sell them a generic software like QuickBooks or an accounting software, or if they're a bigger company, want to spend more money, that they would actually have a proprietary software written that would exactly meet their needs, and then you deliver that to the customer. And then usually in most computer deals these days, you have a service contract. That contract might be for years, that you would sell to them computers, you would tell them the software that they need, teach the people how to use the software, and then you would maintain their networks for years in advance under some sort of payment package. And if it's like a medical office, you might even have someone from your staff that is located in their office to meet their technical needs. But it would be something that would be period. You would explain to the owner manager, everything that they need, and then they would have to decide whether they're going to buy it or not. And then once they buy it, you would set up their computer systems, and then you would have to train their various employees to do the various things. And so if it's a medical company, there might be multiple aspects that people are doing: billing, insurance, records. If it's a store, there could be the sales, uh, accounting, payroll, inventory, orders, supply chain, all these various things. And instruction is purely technical.
Ah, yes, indeed.
And it's kind of like monitor, like when we were like Lowell, like so I say, Lowell never paid you. God forbid.
You're still stuck on that.
Well, I'm not stuck. I'm saying just a occurrence of what I mentioned is that if he was telling us these like stories, I would say if they're like repetitive stories, like for whatever thing. I was saying if he was actually paying you, so let's say like he actually paid you the $50 an hour, and you're trying to teach him how to do his stuff. I mean, he's not live anymore. He couldn't hold it down, but you're trying to teach him how to stream and how to get it to these various platforms. And so you're charging him $50 an hour, and he's telling you these stories. So it turns out that 45 minutes of the hour he was telling you stories, and then the other 15 minutes of the hour you were giving instruction of how to. So he was paying to tell you stories. And like Charles Moskowitz, he said he paid some company $50 remote, and they, through his computer, did what you were going to do for Lowell in less than an hour. They taught him how to, with one click of a button when he goes live on Zoom, get it to go on all these different platforms at the same time. So says that, but Lowell wanted to tell a bunch of stories that that took the majority of the time, as opposed to Charles when he paid this service, was also like $50 for an hour. It was just pure instruction. They were like, hit this button, hit this button, hit this button, and then at the end, you'd be like, okay, you're gonna hit this button, and then it's gonna work.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Right, and there's no persuasion involved.
It?
So, we had talked about it. It didn't work out, as a business setting it up like that. And there's personability in making sales, and a lot of times you might have, Lowell didn't come through, but had he came through, he might have paid you to tell him stories. So it could be like Charles, he would just take instruction, and you would finish everything in an hour and collect your $50. And it could be Lowell, it would take 10 hours, and 9 of those hours would be him telling you stories, and then he would pay you $500 because you were on the clock the whole time.
Yeah, and then it's basically like somewhere between a suicide hotline and a therapist.
Well, it's the same. That's what I say. So technically, in profession, it's usually pure instruction, because when you're on the clock, when you're paying for it, you're just like, no, just give me the instruction. And so like you say, no, like I've worked in professional fields, and I go to engineering conferences. It's just pure instruction. If you're interested, it's just going to be pure technical instruction. And
I don't know what kind of conferences you went to, but I've never been to a conference that I would describe as pure instruction.
Well, I stream if I just go table to table, like at these manufacturer shows that I streamed on my channel, like Automotive Testing Expo, the Battery Show, the Foam Show, Advanced Manufacturing, American Contractors Association, the various streams that I've done on my channel, even just table to table, to where I walk up to the table and tell me what they do, what their product is, what it does, how much it costs. But if they're in sales, so it might be a little bit of persuasion. But usually attached to these shows, they also have training seminars, and the seminars are usually technical. So if it's industrial devices, so the tables are more sales, and they're selling their company, and so it'd be more persuasion. But if you go to the seminar of the people who are trying to learn about the technology, or even already bought the product and trying to use the technology, it's pure instruction, like 3D printers. So if there's a table of a company that's selling 3D printers, and you talk to the person, you might have light conversation, or talk economics, politics, or tell a few jokes. But they're basically to tell you what their company is, what their devices are, and how much it costs. And then once you buy the product, they usually have training package where they're going to teach you how to use it in a certain amount of hours. They might charge you by hours, or they might have group facilities where, like, okay, you bought the 3D printer, and now you could go to their office, and all the people in your area who bought the 3D printer could come to their area for a training seminar. And it's just going to be pure instruction, like do this, do that. And there'll be question and answer, because if there's a bunch of different companies that have different needs, they might ask questions like, well, my company does this and I need to do this. And everybody might have to listen to the person answer your question, or some sort of working where they're giving people are trying, but that's just the way things work. And so in America, the time is money, and you're paying for the instruction. And if there's a whole class of people that are paying for the instruction, no one wants to waste their money, so it's basically just pure instruction. And even universities basically like that. Because the student loans, or rich dad, poor dad, or the current state of liberal society where people are encouraged to get education. Maybe that doesn't make sense for them. But basic university, good schooling, everybody's there because they want to learn, and they're in the field that they want to be in, and it's basically just pure instruction.
Yeah, it's a good observation. It does seem to have gone in that direction quite a bit. That
I would say,
everything can just be broken down to a series of steps, can be made algorithmic, if you will.
so Hamerov is teaching a class on anesthesiology. He might occasionally mention his own takes on OKR, but probably 95% of it is just going to be pure instruction, and then maybe he'll throw in a few things to try to persuade you towards his belief on a series of issues. Like if you were teaching a freshman physics class, you might, if it was a good class, it would probably be 95% pure instruction, and then maybe 5-10% you would be trying to persuade them to look at it in more your school of thought as opposed to other dominant schools of thought. But I say in universities, a lot of times it's pure instruction, and if it's something that's more political or liberal leanings, and occasionally you have a teacher that has their own thinking on something, and over the period of the semester, they'll throw in their direction that you want to think, but it's basically just pure instruction. And algorithmic, like I said, the chess codes, demystifying chess.
Yeah, pure instruction, that's way too vague, but yeah,
broken
it's
into
more so than
components.
just being instruction. It's the notion that things can be rote memorized as algorithmic processes, and that itself confers mastery, some sort.
Well, I'm saying that the expert knows, the master knows the elements of mastery. So over the, if it's a day seminar or like a semester course, that these are the elements that make up the mastery of the subject, and then lays out the elements in whatever style. If it's memory, just writing it on the blackboard, showing some problems, taking some questions. But if they're reach the level of instructor, they usually have the topic broken down, that these are the components of expertise over the period of the course. You will have to master all of these concepts, and then there'll be the class in front of the students. There'll be maybe a resuscitation. There might be office hours. There'll be homework, and the various elements that make up typical university education like that. But the core components is basically part of a curriculum that the teacher doesn't get to decide what the core curriculum that's saying. Like if you're teaching calculus 1, 2, 3, 4, physics 101, electricity and magnetism, thermodynamics, the core curriculum has been decided by the department or the higher powers that be, and you have to give over that core curriculum.
Fair enough. Have you been following this conversation in the chat?
Daryl Frost?
Can I sum it up for you?
I guess if you want, we could wrap up, or if you think it's interesting.
I just want to know. I actually want to know what you think about it, because it's starting to get on my nerves. But maybe you can offer some sort of insight about it. It's basically saying math and natural languages, they're both languages. I'm asking, is there a difference between math as a language and English as a language? And my argument is yes, there is, because math has never existed without some natural language existing before it, i.e. a language that exists without a dictionary. So the thing that the dictionary is basically written about is the natural language. So math needs natural language already existing to arise, in the sense that if we're defining math to necessarily include symbolic representation, which this person did say that they were including that in the definition. So if math necessarily has symbolic representation, that which we attribute to math in nature, why would we necessarily jump to the conclusion that it had symbolic representation? or that we could necessarily understand it. It's basically a meaningless statement.
Yeah,
So
I took linguistics.
the evidence and instantiating the justification for there being no difference between math and natural languages is the fact that nature itself admits mathematical languages, which is somehow not acknowledged as being extremely self-referential.
Yeah, I studied linguistics. I mean, you could call math a language like a, like English, French, Hebrew, Spanish. But I mean, there's a substantial difference between the language of math and if you look at information theory of receiver, sender, medium, receiver, signal, that you could call like English is math is a higher level of abstraction, and you have the alphabet, like where you have phonology. So usually in linguistics you have phonology, morphology, grammar. So you actually have words that are assigned meaning. Then you have a system of like phonetics, of having an alphabet and sounds, and then you have a morphology of a grammar of how words are permeated, to combine meaning, and lexology is the lexicon. Is the words that have meaning, and but I mean, math is a higher level of abstraction. Um, you could call it it's hard to, if you want to say something more or less complex, but I mean, they're doing different things. And then mathematics, if you want to say, is more an objective signifier of reality, as where language is a symbolic method of communication, like a chair, a dog, noun, verb, as
The
opposed to
primary
math.
attribute of language isn't symbolic, it's the sound of it. The symbolism comes after.
Well,
The main thing about a language is that it conveys information. And then how it conveys that information, well, is it still a language? I mean, you can say it's still a language at that point, but then the term language starts to become diluted in meaning. And do you really want to dilute the meaning of that term?
Yes, I mean, linguistics is a great field. So you have phonetics, uh, lexicon, morphology, grammar, put together to make a language. That so your grammar, where you're going to have words that refer to to have meaning, that like it's like chair, categories, or whatever, nouns and verbs that have an understood shared value to people to provide meaning, and then the phonetics of how those are sounded versus a grammar or morphology to change words and connotation of forming sentences and sentence structure. It's similar to like a language of math, but math is more abstract. That that you're talking about processes that could be so like math is more akin to linguistics than a language, because like if you look at like abstract of linguistics, where you're going to give a formulaic understanding of how language works, and any language would work according to the formula, versus an actual language like English that we use. And so, okay, we're using English, and cat means cat and dog means dog, as opposed to a different language. There might be other words that have those connotations, versus math, which is purely abstract for representing values, and those values could represent any, that's why it's abstract, because the values are replaceable for any object.
Wishful thinking. The whole idea is that they're just not, but yeah. So where do we land on that? Can we equate one to the other without diluting meaning? Like, the question is, which one are we calling a language? English or math? Or are they both languages? And then if they are both languages, If they're both a language, how do we distinguish them in their function in the sense that math arises in the context of an existing language? Math is a subset of our language, okay? Now, yes, maybe it describes something greater in the universe, but it's not equal to what it describes. No cause to believe that. Even with the quantum periodic table, which if anything does, it's that. There's no
When
cause
words
to
have multiple meanings,
assume
if
that.
you look in the dictionary, most words have 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 10 different meanings. So at some level, language could be a proper word for mathematics and English or a computer programming language. But when you're talking about English versus math versus computer programming, you might use the same word language for all of them, but they, like in a dictionary, they would be noted as different definitions of the same word.
Okay, so Ralph just said, yes, the cavemen who had math on the cave walls, which I guess because there's like 4 lines in a row, that means they had math. Okay, putting that aside, assuming that we'll grant you that. Not as we know today. How the hell would you know? Were you there with the cavemen and you heard their language and saw their cave drawings? It's like, no, but they obviously spoke before they wrote. Evidence? Babies, speak before they write. Cursive, right? So you're still not at math, even when you can write the natural
So I'm just
language.
typed up on
Clearly, it's
Google.
not the same. It's not about that. It's about if they're the same word. Okay, if they're both a language, we need some other word now. Bulk, metaphysical bulk now to distinguish them and function in the sense that math is synthetic relative to the natural language. That's my
Yeah, I'm
whole
just typed
point.
up on
Ralph.
Google,
That's
and
my whole
you
point.
have 3
is
different
that
definitions of language.
this person who's now stopped comment. Oh no, he's commented again. All right. A method of exchanging information using common terminology. Again, it's like you're going into the same area. You should watch my conversation with logical, floggable, blobbable. You see what happens when you have vagaries in your definition. You just end up going in circles forever because you're never narrowing in on anything precise enough to actually validate any speculation. You don't want to be stuck in one of those, I guess they call them barren plateaus in quantum computing. It's just like if you're climbing a mountain and you think you're going up, but you're actually just going around in a circle at the same level forever, maybe that would be a metaphor for it.
I shared that link at the beginning about nation, and you went over all these etymologies and the history. But here just on Merriam-Webster, if you're like language as a noun, so the first meaning, a system of words or signs that people use to express thoughts and feelings to each other. So in that sense, English or mathematics is correctly used as a language. But
Yeah, I just
you
want to
then,
address a couple of things in these chat here. Ralph says all natural languages can be reduced to push-down automata. That's wishful thinking, okay? Again, wishful thinking is not something you can just assert as a fact. Daryl, it speaks nothing about the information, just how it's exchanged. If it doesn't say anything about the information, it tells you nothing, because in signal processing, how signals go and stuff really does actually depend on the transformer, right? So you can't just make statements about signal processing without actually understanding the system or the information it's conveying.
well, there's
That's where you get
lexicology and
crazy
common
ideas
usage.
like Euclidean axioms being real, even though they can't be real. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, saying you do that, and it's kind of just, to me, just kind of silly. We're just picking like the correct definition of the word. It's like, no, there's common usage, and then you just look in any dictionary.
Yeah,
You're
but
gonna
what
have
you're saying is the same as me.
multiple
You're
meanings,
basically negating the premise of what I'm
meanings
saying.
of the
It's
same
like,
words.
okay, you want to negate the premise of what I'm saying? Fine. I don't accept negative axioms as valid premises, so it's a stalemate, right? It's the never-ending discussion, right? It's like, can you make a negative global assertion and have it be reasonable or sound? No. Do you know why? No? There's more than one way for something to be negative?
Yeah, if you're talking about some sort of logical structure and order, but I'm just talking the pure meaning of words. Words have multiple meanings or understandings. Words have broad and narrow categories to them. So if you're talking like something where you're going to pull out some sort of logical like chart and go through the negation of logic and say that like that some sort of flaw in logic to there, therefore like you're wrong because it's like, I showed a flaw in logic, but it's saying that language or the way people use words doesn't have to be logical.
I would say that you've got two basic axioms with language. One is the ability to convey information. The other is the ability to conceal information. And I think in a lot of times, a lot of cases, the incentives towards concealment.
I think it's nonsensical for you to give your own definitions of words. There's something like learned in linguistics, like definitions are descriptive, not prescriptive. That that most experts in understanding of language say that language, the rules, grammar, definitions, they're not prescribed, they're described. And so you can't prescribe the meaning of words. You can only describe how
Yes, I
people
agree.
use
You
words.
can't do that.
I
Okay,
mean, you
so
can. You could prescribe that this is how I define a word. If you use it other than my way of defining it, you're wrong.
I'm not saying people are wrong to define it else. I'm saying we have to have a common definition. I'm trying to reason out what ought to be the common definition based on what seems to be
Even as we have
most intuitive
dictionaries
to everyone.
or saying that they're saying, who are you?
Dictionaries aren't going to solve the problem of self-reference. We need to narrow them down so that they're measurable. Okay, so I just want to address this notion
If you're
here
trying
about
to
the
create a
information in a
lexicon or
language being
jargon for
independent of what the
experts,
language is actually. Okay, the information a language conveys is not independent of the language. So a natural language conveys some information, does not convey all information. If you want information if you want to see information that natural language doesn't convey, learn math. Because there's stuff in math you won't learn in natural language. And so you realize, oh, there's information that I can't access in natural language, and I've accessed it through math.
I mean,
Note
you're
that
trying
doesn't
to
tell you anything. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying you don't. I mean, I'm saying you don't understand what you're trying to do. But I'm saying if you're trying to create a technical lexicon for experts, and then use that as some sort of gatekeeping, that if people don't correctly use the technical lexicon, they're not an expert. And so you could have that level of saying expertise is understood by the mastery of the related lexicon and proper usage. And so you're playing some sort of game where you're trying to create your own little circle that is defined by how people use words. And I mean, so it's kind of like a game. Like, I mean, if you're a recognized expert or there's a system within it, say they know experts in this field, this is how they use the word. And you could use the like and so yeah, I don't see any purpose to you defining words unless you have some purpose. Like I say, if you're writing a book or you're making a paper and you're describing your idea, you go
Which
through
word am I trying to define in
like
your
like
view?
a scientific paper. You would say these are the I'm using these words in this way. Like like you have to do your historical analysis, and if you're
I thought I was
coming
bringing
up
to
with
the
your
fore the
theory,
need to
you
define
might
words. I didn't think it
define
was
words in the
defining words.
beginning to say this is how you use words. When you use this word, this is what you understand it to mean. So in hereforth in your writing or your speaking, when you use this word, this is what you mean by that. And then maybe eventually you could have like a cult following where the sign of like the shibboleth, where the sign of being part of your cult is that the people in your cult use these words to mean these specific things, as opposed to the rest of society that might use the same word to mean something else.
That's my cult of not sucking at philosophy. It's a cult in almost no ways.
This is a
Really
linguistic
just about not
phenomenon of
sucking
how
at
language is
philosophy.
used.
You don't then transpose your philosophical definitions into day-to-day parlance because you acknowledge that the primary function de facto of language is actually concealment of information. If we're looking at information density, like what is actually happening with language most of the time
In
was
computer
being used
programming, you
for
could prescribe
bullshitting.
meaning. In communication, you could only describe meaning. And if you try to prescribe, then you could describe how you've prescribed it. Or if you have a group of people that accept your prescription, you could describe it. As opposed to computer language, when you program the variable or the word in, you could to the computer, you could prescribe what the computer understands the word to mean. Like in mathematics, like saying you could, if you're laying out the formula and you prescribe that these are what the variables stand for. But the thing for communication, you could only describe how people understand meaning.
How would you possibly know that?
Because I took linguistics. I mean, that's what my
Right,
I mean,
and this is the same people who teach that the laws of logic are universal, even though they're literally all wrong.
well, I mean, so it's like I don't want to. I mean, God forbid, waste my time. I was saying like, no, I took like 10 courses on linguistics. I got a whole shelf of books on linguistics, and like, um, I'm not really interested in your theory on linguistics. I mean, you're a smart woman, you might have some thoughts, but like, no, like, I'm not really interested. Like, you're not Noam Chomsky. Like, I'm not really
Okay,
interested
no problem.
in your theory on linguistics.
There's a question from Mohit. How does learning different languages affect the brain and what interests the most?
In fact, ironically, when I was in high school, I was mentioning this, that my mother, told me that the two highest fields um, of IQ were fields of expertise were linguistics and physics. Well, it's possibly a different subset, and if you never actually took a course or read a book in linguistics, or maybe you took like phonetics in terms of computer language, which is part of linguistics. But I mean, no, I mean linguistics is a field in the study of language and how it's used, and it's reasonably well developed and understood.
You're saying it's descriptive, not prescriptive.
That language is descriptive, not prescriptive. I mean, grammar and lexicon is descriptive,
So,
not
what is
prescriptive.
prescriptive then in culture?
When we say culture, I mean that even if you wanted to put like to a separate level, that law is descriptive, not prescriptive. Like I mean, you put like like that makes
Well,
it
that's
like
definitely not true.
well,
It's
it is somewhat.
prescriptive of punishments for crimes.
It is somewhat true. It's like I'm in Detroit, and I was thinking the other day, like the speed limit's 40, and then there's a cop going 45, and people are passing the cop going 50. So I mean, the law is like the prescription, like the descriptive, like if it was the prescription that this is the speed limit, it's not really prescriptive, or even to saying does the law come first to prescribe how people should act, or the law comes after and describes how society has gotten together. And what I'm saying for law is something that you may make an argument, but if you're talking about the meaning of words and how we understand how words have meaning, and how grammar has meaning, that like historically uh, it's descriptive of how people used language. It's not prescriptive. There's not. I mean, a few times in history, like the emperor of Korea created the alphabet and like prescribed that everybody will use this alphabet from here on out. But the history of language, the use of language, is descriptive. That people came to have common meaning and understanding behind words or use of grammar, and then people wrote books on grammar or dictionaries that described how people used words. Someone didn't write a dictionary that prescribed the meanings of words. Someone wrote a dictionary that described the meanings of words. So you don't,
That would be nice,
Merriam-Webster
but we
didn't
can't
decide
validate
that
that
this is the
assertion
meaning
as
of
true
language.
at all, can we?
Merriam-Webster described how people use the the meaning of words. So in Merriam-Webster,
Mm-hmm.
language has 4 different definitions because it's descriptive, and people use the word language in multiple ways. And so the dictionary isn't prescribing the exact meaning of the word. The dictionary is describing how people use the word. And that's kind of basic linguistics and even grammar. That there wasn't like I mean, you do have committees of grammar and associate groups of English teachers or whatever that actually vote on different things, even related to grammar. But even grammar is more descriptive of how people use language than prescribing that this is how you must use language.
Ralph said that all meanings can be reduced to semantic triples. I think Ralph just really enjoys throwing his credibility into the mud daily. Has anyone ever actually believed anything Ralph has ever said? Sorry. But okay, so this notion that a language can exist without symbolic representation basically undermines the meaning of the term language. What do you think? Like, I guess, I don't know.
I think you're thinking about it. I don't think you're really making sense. You can't prescribe the meaning of words. You can only describe the meaning of words. So if we're talking about concepts or logic.
In math, you can prescribe the usage of theorems through your own reasoning. So there's no reason we can't prescribe a particular definition for a word, not a universal one that for our purposes here makes sense. Like with my
Not ours. I'm saying your purpose. The purpose of language is to communicate. So you want to describe that saying when you use a word, the purpose of that word is to be able to convey meaning to other people. So saying you use the word in the way that other people understand common concepts. You can't prescribe. So say if you write a paper and you want to express an idea and you choose the word to do it, and then you have a defined, this is how you understand the word for someone using your paper. But when you're speaking to a person that you've never met before, you have to use common usage of the words, and you're going to assume that when you use
the word, because they don't know what the term means. They have no clue
that they're not going to know
it won't
your definition.
Way.
They're gonna understand the word according to a common usage of their own understanding.
They're just not going to understand it. Period.
Yes,
Stamp, sealed,
so
delivered.
you're gonna have a communication failure, that you failed in communication theory.
There was no expectation of communication because you don't bring those subjects up in a secular context because there's no expectation that anyone's going to give a shit or even understand the premise.
Because they're descriptive, not prescriptive.
And when you want them to be,
no one knows your
when you want them to
prescription.
describe reality, you have to prescribe particular meaning to have actual clarity in the conclusion.
You don't get to prescribe these things when you like these
well,
things.
You could. I mean,
these things are evolved over a
doesn't.
process. These things are evolved over long periods of times, over large amounts of people, and so you have common usage. That means common usage that millions, tens of millions of people use this word to convey some sort of basic meaning. And so what your idea in your head of what you mean versus the word that you use to convey meaning to other people is you're using the word as understood by other people, not understood by yourself.
You're presupposing they understand. They can't give a coherent definition, let alone get past the self-reference problem. I deny the premise. They don't understand.
That's why you fail as a communicator.
Mm-hmm. Except my quantum computer's getting built, isn't it? So, results.
Well, I mean, even if saying that you could.
I just want to respond to the chat here before
you could be a technician who defined a device, but you still failed at communication.
That's why I need you. Do I feel?
So why don't I just sign off, and if you want, you could keep on talking with the chat.
So we didn't really get anywhere with that.
To me, these things are largely kind of just annoying. I'm saying, like, okay, if you haven't studied a field and you want to claim expertise in the field, you don't want to learn about the field, so you want to like assume that you're an expert in a field that you're not. So it is just kind of pointless and almost somewhat irritating. But what to argue with. So I'll just sign off. Have a great week and blessings.
Blessing, sorry I wasn't listening better. I'll work on it. Yeah, I got distracted by the chat. Nice job. Whoops. There's a lot of trolling in the chat right now. And the question is it 100% bullshit or just 99% bullshit? Do I feel I don't agree with me enough? It seems as though the only thing you're attempting to communicate is that you don't wish to communicate anything. And it's like, you could have just said nothing. That's my confusion. Yes, Ralph, that's right. Doooovid wants to leave me and start streaming with you. Hashtagged out. This is not about using a different word or speaking a different language or anything of the sort. It was a single point about math and natural languages not being at all in any sense the same. And then an incredibly confusing, unjustified, irrational leap of logic where justification for math being a language was that it somehow existed latently in the universe, ooh la la, and that this wasn't math worship when clearly it's indistinguishable from math worship. So, just something to think about. I can't believe this show has gone on for this long, so. In terms of, whether language is descriptive or prescriptive, if there's no prescriptive element to language, why do dictionaries change meaning so often? Right. Wow, Wittgenstein sounds pretty worthless, sorry to say. And even if that's true, who says, who puts the boundaries of whatever, right? So it's like, it's kind of reality at the end of the day that puts boundaries on what's real. Oh, was that the law of identity? Well, it's the one non-trivial implication of it where you can sort of say, well, the question is reframed to, okay, what's the best way to access the greater reality? And then realizing that as you go and you empty the set of commonalities between all the different perspectives on reality and how you can build that up down to where the set is empty, that's where you start to see the necessity for these specifications. And maybe we don't even need to come to a conclusion, and you can see that when we try to go to something super, perhaps more rigid, more certain, there's just a huge amount of resistance to it. Well, we want to account for why. Because there's some stuff, yeah, no matter how passionate that whatever a particular person is, that those subjects will have cause for negative consequences. Well, if you understand why, then you'll avoid them. Oh, that's great. Okay, so it looks like everyone's gone from the chat. I thought I was going to keep on with my argument there with Daryl. I was finding that, I was wondering where that was going to end up. I guess it ended up with a desertion. I guess that's score what for me again? Oh, who's counting? Anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed my rap. I'll play it again instead of the usual outro. That's getting old. Bye for now. See you next Sunday. If not today.
I'm the COE. You don't know me. From the group you want to throw me, show me, scold me, mold me, tarnish my crown with your frown, take me down. But I keep on coming, with strength that's mind-numbing. Didn't anticipate this time it'll last. Close your mouth, it's drooping of gas. You want to go to the champ? When you need the side ramp for the secret Socratic self-cramp? Your voice is shit. You need the amp, filter, echo, high pass, auto-tune, approval stamp. Even Bogdanovs can't procure you a pity pant. Your content's not dark, it's damp. I'm the COE. You don't know me. Cosmic Flame Wars show me where to light the fuse on the FG. Was it worth the clown? You're about to tap out as I go to the mat and lay you flat with less force than a gnat. That's right, read the first line. Oh no, you can't. Your third's blind. Take it from the top one more time. Hold the image in your mind, stop before space-time unwinds, undress the cosmos like a clementine. I'm COE. You don't know me, but I'm sure you'll show me all the loops you want to throw me. But you'll never find a sound fallacy in my model of the galaxy, reconciling Hubble and relativity. Special! It's futile to run and check your browser. I'm Mario, you're just my NPC bitch, Bowser. Now settle down, reckless clown. Turn that frown upside down. I'll teach you what I found. Please don't pry, lie, and try to change the rules on the fly. I really wish you saw why. I won't beg you to buy. What I own can't be shown, only known and grown. No cash deal for divinity revealed. No shortcuts on this wheel.
Yeah, but that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of.
It's so important that she can't be told, she won't be told that it's wrong. And
bringing it back to Church of Entropy and her attack dog Gandalf the White.
Why don't you learn to shut up and fuck your goddamn logic?
they control the media, and the media is capable of making the sheeple believe in anything.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, we've had these streams, and I've been doing with Church of Entropy, and she's been bringing on new people, and like we did those streams on like stream etiquette. We walked through like the technology.
I have like very strongly negative opinions of the kind of Brundle clique.
Is she trying to garner herself cult prestige by associating